All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Jim Godfrey. I'm the chair of the CAC, and it's about 1:34. Yeah. So we'll call the meeting to order. As of right now, everybody can vote. No, we can't. Somebody changed. Rick.
So since I told you everybody could vote, we had two more come in the room. Larry and joined, and anyway, so two alternates cannot vote as of right now. Russell McPadden and Tony.
Russ and Tony, no vote. Can participate in the conversation if we end up having to take a by name or vote. Those two can't vote in that situation. So, all right. Well, thanks for everyone for being here. We've got a lot to cover today, and some pretty important subjects. So I've arranged for Cheers to bring in happy hour around 4:30. No, we're so glad everybody's here, and thanks for your time and effort. All right, so do I have a motion or any changes to the agenda? Don't see any. A motion to approve the agenda as presented. So Richard, okay. Ed, you second? All right, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
I as well. Okay, great. Agenda approved. Public comment period. Is there any public comment for items not on the agenda by any of the committee members? Anyone in the public? Not seeing anyone. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt. I miscounted. Mr. Lee, as an alternate, cannot vote also. So we're only missing one person. So 3 out of 4 of the alternates cannot vote.
Okay, great. Mr. Lee's on. He's on? That's great. Welcome. He'll be finished his training soon, I hope so.
And Mr. Chair, apologies in advance. I need to leave around 3-ish or so. So
Okay.
If someone needs to vote, or if there's a vote to be had, I can either go online and by phone remotely, or get it all right to vote in place after 3.
All right, thank you. Item number 4, approval of the minutes of the May 3rd meeting. Do any corrections or adjustments? Not seeing any.
Tobias moves to approve the minutes as presented.
Larry moved to approve. Second, Rich. Okay, all right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Great. All right, financial reports. Lisa.
All right, Lisa Corey, I'm the finance manager for the PPRTA. The month that we are reporting is for March. So March 2023 sales and use tax was above the monthly budget by $355,213 or 2.8%. March 23 revenues were below March 22 revenues by $161,343 or negative 1.2%. Our actuals received in March was $12,840,327. Did anyone have any questions on those?
Dave.
Lisa, always appreciate great report, great information. Thank you for the job you're doing. Help us understand the decrease we're seeing. I just met with some city folks last week. They were also seeing, as you probably know, a decrease in their revenues. Can you elaborate on that? Why it's not a huge downturn, but it's no longer an upturn?
Right. Yeah, I think it's probably more to do with the recession. We've kind of seen, or a looming recession. So if we look at January, February, and March, it has been going down a little bit every month. So I would probably anticipate that to continue, which is part of why I did not want to add anything to the sales and use tax budget for this mid-year, just because of that trend. So
yeah, and it looks like that even though it's down, it tends to follow the trend line. March has gone up, so I mean it's tracking, but slightly off. So the part that I was looking for when I saw the numbers was a drastic decrease in the trend. And so apparently March is everybody's out spending, landscaping, doing all kinds of work and spending money, but, so.
There's not as much money.
Just not as much, yeah. Okay,
I was going to just make a comment. Thank you very much for putting in that cost construction index.
Yeah.
That's in there. I do appreciate it. I think people have been asking, kind of give us the context of the cost increases. Just a couple of comments though. The title, it should be the first quarter of 2012 instead of the fourth quarter 2022 as far as the cost index. The other thing, there's no citation, but you can find it at the CDOT website. And it is a basket. I looked it up. It's a basket of 5 materials, different kinds of materials like earthworks and hot mix asphalt and so on, different kinds of things. It doesn't include any labor. I just wanted to point that out. So we've seen some labor increases in our construction costs, but this chart does not incorporate labor increases. So thank you.
Mhm.
all right. Thank you, Carlos. Any other questions or comments for Lisa? All right, thank you. Item 5B, the mid-year budget amendment.
Well, how much do we want to get into the detail of it?
So we didn't do any increases in allocation, right? We didn't.
So we are allocating more funds. We did not increase the sales and use tax part of the budget. But this would include carryover from last year because we did collect a little bit over the sales and use tax that we had budgeted for. But we were quite a bit over in interest for last year as well. But what I released was another 8 million in interest that's above budget or projected to be at least that above budget.
Okay. So it was the 8 million, but not from tax.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead, Brandy.
Thanks for that kind of intro. For those of us that are new, can you explain the 8 million? Because I know there's a lot of math that goes in behind the scenes, but then you just write down 8 million and we're kind of wondering what's behind the curtain is how you get to the 8 million and what projections are getting you to that point.
For the additional revenue or the carryover?
For the additional 8 million of interest revenue was added to the budget.
Because at this point, I think we were already through March, we were like 5.6 million in interest income. And we had budgeted for 500,000. So with that trend, we would more than exceed the budget probably within third quarter at the latest. So. Right, yeah.
That's a good use to actually take that extra interest income and put it into it versus taking it out of the tax revenue money. So it doesn't do us any good sitting in the bank earning interest. So that's a good way to add a little bit. So to help offset some of the other cost and labor and that kind of stuff. So thanks for that clarification.
Mhm.
That answer your question, Brady? Okay. Any other questions for Lisa on the budget? All right. So do I have a recommendation to approve the mid-year budget amendment as presented? Rick?
Do you want individual presentations by each member government?
Oh, yeah, I forgot to add that. Sorry. Is everybody okay with the information that was presented to you as part of the budget? No questions or concerns? Okay, not seeing on anybody online. Okay. All right. So the answer is no. So all those in favor of approving, wait a minute, hold on. I have a motion to approve the mid-year budget amendment as presented. Yep, Craig.
Yep, I move that we approve the amended budget.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
And I would second that.
All right, very good. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. 6A, capital maintenance and public transportation contract, City of Colorado Springs line item transfer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gail Sturter with the City of Colorado Springs. So this line item transfer would be taking additional monies that are currently sitting in projects, the Black Forest Road project and the Stapleton Drive Briar Gate Parkway corridor study, and move those into the Circle Drive Bridge contract. For the Black Forest Road movement, that road project is under construction. We're proposing to move $1.5 million we're currently holding within the project contingency out to Circle Drive. That would leave $1.6 million in ARPA funding plus nearly another $1 million in PPRTA funding for that project. So a total of almost 2.6 million. I do have a large change order coming. It's going to be one of the elements of that project that were triggered was to do tributary improvements for Cottonwood Creek. That is in the process of being priced, but we feel like we have adequate funding still left with that project account to cover the construction costs and any other things we might encounter during construction throughout 2023. The second one is removing funding from the Stapleton Briardate Corridor Study. That was a joint effort that was led by a joint effort project between the city and county that was led by the county. And we've been in the process of reconciling and kind of trying to close out and balance those accounts between the 4 joint projects we had. In doing so, that left us $679,946 remaining in that account. This line item transfer would take the money from that account and essentially close it from the city's standpoint and move that also to the Circle Drive bridges. So as a result of this line item transfer, we would be adding $2,176,946 to the Circle Drive Bridge project. And I will mention in the budget amendment that you just approved, I am also showing, I don't remember the exact number, but it's roughly $330,000 in the mid-year budget for Circle Drive Bridges to increase that total budget amount by 2.5 million. And that's what we're projecting to be needed for completion of that project. And you'll hear me talk about a change order related to that project later today. So any questions on the line item transfer?
Any questions for anybody? Not seeing anyone online either. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the city's request for line item transfer as presented?
Chair, this is Emily Magnuson. So moved.
Thanks, Emily. Second, anyone?
Carlos Perez, go ahead, second.
Carlos, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any disapprovals? Welcome, Karen. All right. Item 6B, City Colorado Springs projects.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Gail Sturdivant, once again for the city of Colorado Springs. We have 11 contracts for the CAC's consideration today. The first 2 are going to be related to the Mark Shuffle Road Improvement Project that we've been working on with the use of funding from the roadway safety and traffic operations and the intersection improvement program or traffic programs to include general fund monies and developer contributions. This first contract is for the construction, or what we refer to as package 1, which is the rest of what I'm going to refer to as phase 1, and you're going to see publicly, to help us finish for construction for the northbound lanes from Carefree to Tamlin, plus the redo of that intersection at Barnes. This would be awarded at $15,033,535.21, or up to that amount, to Kramer North America. I will remind you that we went through a CMCG RFP process. We had 6 respondents, and Kramer North America was the contract that was selected there. And we've been in pricing negotiations with them on this final package to get this phase 1 work done. Any questions on that particular element? Okay, I'll move on to the second contract for Mark Shuffle Road is to do construction management, administration, and inspection and testing services for the same Mark Shuffle Road improvements to Wilson and Company. This amount would be in $1,324,780. Questions related for that item?
I got a question just on the Mark Shuffle, and I guess I could look it up in the financial report, but what's the status of RTA 1 money that was designated for Mark Shuffle? Is that being used?
It is being used. In fact, we're using that money first. But that money somewhat is going to be replenished, like we have a developer contribution that's coming in. So as soon as we get money in that account, we are actually obligating that money in these construction contracts. Okay. And then as we get invoices, we're paying down RTA 1 monies first. Then we're paying down city general fund money second, and then we're going to the traffic programs that we've
Okay.
been allocating money towards.
All right, thank you.
Actually, let me add in there. I'm gonna spend Josh's maintenance money next.
Oh, good.
Maybe you'll
Okay.
see that. Sorry, I should have hit that funding component and then the traffic programs. I just want to make sure he was aware that that was in that construction contract. We talked about that in the line item transfer and the funding plan for Mark Shuffle back in March for those who are here.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, I'm going to move on to contract. Oh, yes. Dave.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In fact, that was a question I had for you, Gail. Could you refresh our collective memories about the interrelationship between the county, Josh, and the monies? I know that the road was a
Yeah.
long time, was supposedly El Paso County, and there's a transition, different sections,
Yeah.
different times. I've
Let-
lost the bubble.
Yeah,
on-
so I can't tell you about.
No, just a brief
The-
overview.
it's gone
Who's doing
back and
what?
forth, but as of, the city currently has taken ownership of the entire Mark Shuffle Road from the north extent all the way down to the Fountain City limits.
Really?
We have. It has not been annexed completely into the city, but we have taken ownership of the road.
So the city owns a road in the county.
Yes. This happens frequently, actually. I know that's not completely surprising, but so we own the road. We've been working with the county, they've been committing that 1.5 million to address the drainage issue there on that low water crossing that sits just north of North Carefree. So as part of this, taking on the ownership now and to be able to put ourselves in a position to advance the project, one of the commitments from the county was to continue to provide that funding to address that drainage issue in that area. And that's really the only real funding obligation. So the city's taking that on in its entirety to work on that project.
So the county's really out of it, other than the little low water crossing. They're done. Right?
I think that's
Pretty much,
completely
yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
Richard?
Gail, I may have missed it. I'm a little hard of hearing at times, particularly when I'm not sure I like it. But since you've, I have no problem with the city taking it over. So I would hope that the county's not putting any more money in.
The county is not putting any more money in, but what we did as part of this taking it over when we were doing the PPRTA 3 list, one of the other things we agreed to do is that the city would not be contributing any funds to the Briargate Stapleton Extension project. So instead of really mixing monies and future RTA 3 projects, we really looked at a way that was equitable to split those joint community effort or regional efforts up front.
I'm very much in favor of these combined things. And also when we have to pass it up to PPRTA, let them take the lead. I think this cooperation is the way that that's the strength of these regional commissions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Any other questions on Mark Shuffle?
let's move on.
All right, I'm going to move on. The contracts 3 and 4 for your consideration today are for the Academy Boulevard project. Also, this is an A-list project. This is what we refer to the south phase because we have the 2 Academy Boulevard projects. The north phase is that segment that runs from Airport to Bijou, and the south segment runs from Fountain to Milton Kirby Parkway. When we bid the contract out, and this is kind of a little bit of refresh in history, when we bid the contract out, we had 100% plans for the north segment, 90% plans for the south segment. We did the bid, and we selected Ames Construction. We had 3 respondents on that particular area, and they gave us a cost on that. As we went through that 90 to 100% design, we had some quantities that were adjusted and some final design considerations that need to be incorporated in the plans. And those design changes were centered around some additional drainage requirements, electrical requirements, and that means like signals in particular, and subsurface stabilization and some water line design efforts. In doing so and finalizing those quantities, it results in a change order for that construction contract. The change order amount would go to Ames Construction in the amount of $2,985,957. That's going to bring that total construction account just for that south segment to $47.9 million. I will point out, though, that almost $7.2 million of that is Colorado Springs Utilities work, which they have contributed those funds towards that project, but it's all being done under our contract. So anyway, that's contract number 3. Contract number 4 is related to the construction inspection. We went through an RFP process where we selected a construction management firm. We received 5 respondents. AECOM was selected for that work. The first contract was put in place with AECOM was just for construction management of that north phase, because the timing final quantities wasn't really done with the south phase, as I mentioned previously. Now that we've got the final construction documents, a construction bid from finalized items from AECOM, from Ames. They sound very similar, don't they? Ames and AECOM. We were able to finalize the construction management cost with AECOM for that. So this would result in a change order to AECOM in the amount of $2,180,488. And the city feels like that's very reasonable pricing and what the expectation is for them to provide that service. So questions on those 2 contracts? Okay, contract number 5 is for the Beacon Street Rail Crossing upgrades. And I will mention there is a map located in your packet to kind of help maybe describe this. If you happen to be users of the Pikes Peak Greenway, you'll know that you have to come up to street level at Beacon Street by the Van Buren ditch, and that's the only way you can really get over the ditch in that location. But in that same location, you have a rail spur line. It is very rough. It's one of my least favorite portions of that particular ride. The railroad has been working in cooperation with the city to improve that crossing, because that really is the only way to get across the ditch and that location. So there's 2 components related to this. One is work that's going to be performed by the Union Pacific Railroad, where we have a historic cost sharing agreement with them for this particular crossing. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And then the city will be doing some other work to finish improvements in that location. So for today's contract, the city's portion for the Union Pacific work is anticipated to be no more than $123,000. The reimbursement for those efforts. So we were asking for your approval to pay them back for that effort improvements to that location. Questions on that contract?
Yeah, if you're an inspector, you ought to go to work for the railroad. You only get 400 an hour or something.
We wish it was that easy. All right, we're going to move on to the Circle Drive Bridge contract. So just to take a step back in history, because we put this procurement in place 1.5 years ago, where we pre-qualified construction contractors and then did an invitation for bid. We did have six folks that were pre-qualified and then responded, and we put a contract in place for the Circle Drive Bridge replacement. Well, now, as we were finalizing railroad agreements, one of the railroads decided to take a step back, and we had to basically go back to the drawing board. Railroad agreements. And ultimately, as we're nearing completion with that effort, that would put the construction project in a not ideal time to work either in the creek and then looking at their construction schedule for paving. So we've been working on negotiating modifications for essentially what's going to result in a 16th month delay to the start of the project to have to resolve the railroad issues and finalize some drainage and put itself in a most ideal construction schedule. The construction contractor will still be performing the work within the contract terms. We're just delaying the start that's in there. But through this process, it has resulted in cost changes that are allowed within our construction contract provisions, because there's only so many days they can hold that. So going through this, we've been working with SEMA Construction on this, results in a construction contract change of $3,284,265.76. I will mention, and I think I put it in the memo here, that this results in a 6.7% change year over year. So escalation. So we did pretty well in negotiation with the construction contractor in this area. And I think ultimately we're going to get a better product starting at the right time to optimize the work in the channel, and then also getting better paving when we are ready to do that based on their schedule. Questions related to that item? Oh, I did want to mention one thing, even with this change, it's, if you go back and look at the prices we got almost a year and a half ago, this still would make them close to the lowest bidder, put them in second place without giving the others the opportunity. So we still feel very comfortable with that price moving forward. Contract number 7, this is related to the West Fillmore Bridge Replacement Project. This is another A-list project. The city went through a best value request for proposal process. We have 3 respondents. For those of you who don't remember, this culvert is located crosses underneath Fillmore, but it is directly west of Coronado High School, if you're not familiar with where this project's located. Reason why this may seem high for a culvert replacement, this is actually a tunnel that needs to go in place. I think we've talked about the complexity in this work in the past. We've gone through, we're in the final stages of awarding the contract and recommend awarding to Native Sons Construction in the amount of $2,014,775. Questions related to that? Okay. Hopefully these get a little easier. The next 4 are maintenance contracts. The first one is for the dig out and patch. The city went through an RFP process earlier in the year, or at the end of last year. We got 3 respondents. We selected Trax Construction. This is putting a task order in place for $350,000 to the dig out and patch maintenance work. And this will be PPRTA funded on PPRTA efforts.
So just for my clarification, the difference between the pothole repair and the dig out and patch is when the pothole is bigger than practical to just add to, they dig out a bigger piece, take it down and then pave it.
Yeah, that's one of the ways they could do it. The thing I see most often, and if I can see if one of my maintenance folks is here, guess not. But one of the other things I see frequently, if you have cracks that traverse the street,
Right.
And those tend to get wider over time, get sediment built in them. You really can't pave over them or do traditional patching. You actually have to cut out, recompact that and build that up. So that is a larger area, but that's usually more linear in nature versus like a true
Right.
patch, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yep. Thank you.
Contract 9 is for our slurry seal maintenance efforts. The city went through an RFP process. We've gone through an RFP process. We got 2 respondents. This will be for initial base year contract for $1.5 or $1.4 million to, A1 chip seal. And this contract is the base year contract, and there is 4 option years available to the city. So you're approving both the base contract and the funding with the work in this first year. And this is one of our newer reinstated maintenance programs, Dave, that we've talked about.
And Mr. Chair, if I could offer 2 comments.
Go ahead, Dick.
This is huge. This is a game changer for the city. Congratulations, Gail, to you and everyone involved genuinely in this. This is arguably long overdue and very much worth the effort. The second comment I'd like to offer is I had a discussion. There's no way to not drop names with John Suthers, now the most recent former mayor, on, I guess it was Thursday of last week, about this exact issue. Essentially, is it appropriate, or is it most appropriate for PPRTA to be spending its money for this extremely valuable program? And the response back, you probably guess where this is going, was that's the way it's currently wired in the 2C nomenclature. And so there may be, I'm just sharing that because I feel so strongly about the value of this program that if there's a way, and the city staff at now the former mayor's direction may be exploring opportunities or ways to include slurry in addition to this as part of a 2C program. And I know that's.
Yeah, those are actually ongoing discussions, not just with this pavement maintenance, but we're also having discussions on how do you get more maintenance or more money for bridge maintenance activities that need to go along with these same things. So we've been talking about what we're making some shifts potentially in the future. Now, this is subject to some voter approval and some other buy-in, but do you put more emphasis on other pavement preservation activities with 2C and take PPRTA maintenance focus and other transportation infrastructure? So it's ongoing.
Good.
And that was basically the conversation with the mayor was that very thing was, where is it appropriate to do this kind of thing? Because it's more like a 2C effort than our.
Right, but as it's currently written, it's
Right,
to repave those streets.
Right.
And the question that Jim and I had with John was define paving as it relates to resurfacing, and we won't get into the details. but-
Right, right, I'm sure he talked to you about what the electorate's understanding is of
Yes.
paving and.
Yeah.
Anyway, more clarification to come on that. We're
Thank you.
laying the groundwork on that. In fact, it was laid before our current mayor was selected or voted on, and I'll be briefing him on Friday or start opening that door. So
Good.
there's a lot of things to happen over the next couple of years, but we anticipate looking at the 2C ballot initiative next November.
Good. Again, congratulations on the slurry seal, long overdue
Yeah.
and much worth the effort. So
Yeah,
good on you.
thank you. Appreciate that. And it's really Corey Farkas's team who's put that program together. So I want to make sure to give his folks a shout out for that. All right, 2 more contracts, still both maintenance. The next one is it's the chip seal program to fund it for 2023 efforts. This contract was put in place in 2020. This is the 3rd option year with A1 chip seal, and it would be in the amount of $1,498,062.38. And the last maintenance contract is for long life pavement marking materials. This is the 2nd year, or the first option year underneath this contract that was put in place by PPRTA last year. This would allow us up to 600, allow us to get materials for striping efforts that would be performed by city crews using the PPRTA funds on PPRTA projects, and up to an amount of $600,000. So any additional questions on those 11 contracts?
Gail, I had a question. It was just more. What is different about the long life marking material?
Can I refer you to somebody or have somebody call you that knows more
Yeah.
about the material than I do?
I've just seen some new
Okay.
markings down and some of them look like they're etched into the pavement or into the concrete.
Yeah.
But I was just curious, is it new
Yeah.
technology, new materials?
I would really have to have one of the signal or one of the striping guys speak
That's
with
fine.
you directly. I do know that depending on the duration we're trying to get with the product, like if it's a temporary, we would use a product that's pretty easy to remove. Or we'll use epoxy or some other new technology. So
Not a priority, just a question.
I apologize.
Yes, sir.
It might be worth 30 seconds since we've never had a slurry seal contract before that I remember to spend a few seconds defining the difference between slurry seal and chip seal. I think it's the size of the aggregate. I think the aggregate in slurry seal is sand size, and the aggregate in the size of chip seal is size of a pea or smaller. Anybody have a better definition than that?
Yeah, I would just describe, I think that there's more of a petroleum-based product and binder in the slurry seal.
Okay,
In addition to the chip seal product that you mentioned.
And typically a slurry seal is laid down with like a squeegee
Right,
kind of application, whereas a chip seal is, it's hot applied.
right. And I would say that the slurry mix tends to provide more waterproofing to your pavement section. With the chip seal, you try to get that waterproofing, but you're also getting a new wearing surface down to help make that pavement section last longer.
Thank you.
I think from the standpoint of what the citizens may see, it's very easy for grandma to confuse a slurry seal with a new overlay. They're both black, they're both smooth, they look good, they smell the same. It's just you're not digging up at. In fact, the one question that we'd asked Corey Gal in our discussion with John last week was, would they please run a rough comparison per square yard, per running foot of what a slurry cost per foot versus what is a milling and overlay cost? It's probably 10 to 1. But again, if it's indistinguishable to the lay eye, and you get the same increase in the pavement condition index, the PCI, that you do from slurry as you do from a very expensive milling and overlay, you're miles literally ahead investing in this preventative maintenance thing for a variety of reasons. But the big downside, I think, of the chip seals historically is you get the skid resistance, which is good in the winter, but you get the tire noise, you get the buzz, and you get the road noise, which is thought to be undesirable from the chip seal. You get a lot more traffic noise from chip seal. Slurry seal doesn't give you the skid resistance, but gives you a very quiet road. So it's great for neighborhoods as opposed to chip seal, which gives you a lot of traffic noise. I'm sorry? It does a better job into the cracks. It's probably a little more difficult to put down on a day like today when the weather's unpredictable. You don't want to do it because it'll wash into the driveways and it's on the carpets in the house. You get a lot of complaints. But if you do it right and your timing is good, it's a fabulous product. So that's why I'm so passionate, crazy as it sounds. I'm so passionate about this stuff because it's 10 times cheaper than an overlay.
Dave, you may know this question, or the answer to this question better than me, but I think too, you have a different timing or life cycle time frame that you want to put the slurry down versus the chip. So you want to put the slurry down earlier on in the maintenance life cycle. And if it's degraded to a lower pavement condition, you would want to do an overlay potentially.
Yeah, that's debatable, and not to get too complicated in this group, which is a policy group, but I think there's a third option, which is a blend of a slurry and chip. They call that a cape seal. When you start with a chip seal for that very reason, and then you do get some structural, you get some strength out of a combination slurry because it's a little thicker than a chip seal, and that's where John Southers and Jim and I were talking. We were conflicted last week because technically, legally, a cape seal slurry plus chip equals overlay, and that triggers concrete repair on the ADA ramps, which crazy to say you're only getting a ½ inch out of it, but that crazy ½ inch will trigger you a very, very expensive concrete replacement initiative that runs in parallel with it. So it's complicated, but it's worth doing is the point. So thank you, Rick, for bringing that up.
All right. Any further discussion or questions regarding the city's projects? Yeah, Rich?
So I just had one quick question for you too, Gail. On the SEMA project, I think it's SEMA. What was driving the price increases? Were there specific items or was it across the board?
Excuse me. Are you talking about the Circle Drive Bridge?
Yes.
One? Let me go back and look. I know.
I was just out of
thought it was in
curiosity.
Particular areas. There were a couple line items. Let me see if I put them down in there. But there was actually more, so on that one. Yeah, most of it is really across the board that had happened because they could not sign a contract with their subcontractors. So they actually went out and had to get new pricing. But really what we asked them to do is to treat it almost like a CMCG approach, where we had them go out and bring us back and show us multiple bids to make selections. So, and I have a whole detailed memo that's put together with this particular line items, if you'd be interested in seeing. I actually brought it with me.
Yeah, we don't have to take this group. I was just kind of curious if there were certain elements that were increasing faster than others or, some.
Yeah, and you can see that some have a higher percentage increase than others, but because they kept it competitive, when they had to get for their subcontractors, we ended up being pretty good overall from a price increase in comparison to the base contract.
How much of it was due to the delay by the railroad that just pushed everything out?
Well, I would say it's 100%.
I knew that was the answer. But
And for those of you who are familiar with it, you have a construction and maintenance agreement. That's one of the last things you get. We had one ready to sign it. And the other railroad said, no, we want to be part of this. We want a 3-party agreement that they've never done before. And we had to start over.
of course, they've had a whole 1.5 or 2 years to make that decision.
But they waited literally as we were getting ready as we were bidding the project and getting a contractor on board. So. And it is still not 100% finalized, but we're so close.
Until somebody else. Don't say that. All right. Any other discussions, questions? Okay, then I have a motion to approve the city's contracts as presented and discussed. All right, Rich, thank you. Second, Ed, second, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Gail. All right, the next one. El Paso County, 6C.
Yeah, I'd like to just say something.
Okay,
Could I just say something first, Josh, before you go into your presentation? As part of this 105 project, the county in conjunction with, I think it was Monument, on May the 23rd, held a public meeting and went over with the public what was included in this project. I didn't go there personally, but I did participate by the Zoom. And I have to say, Josh, I thought the meeting went very well. The presentation was very good. It gave the public the overview of what was going to occur on this project. So I think that's really good in letting the public in that area know what is going to happen, starting in the next month or so. So overall, I think that presentation was good. I think it was worthwhile. There had a couple people who objected to certain things, but you'll always have that, and no matter what project you're dealing with. But overall, I thought it was well done, and I think that will help with the public's perception as this project moves forward.
I appreciate that, Larry. I would agree with you. I think the meeting went very well, and partial thanks to Steve, who unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective for the town of Monument, they're gonna have a rough couple years between Highway 105 and Jackson Creek and Higby. It's going to be, there's a lot of work that's going to go on in the next couple years. But I appreciate that. Thank you. The county, Josh Palmer, El Paso County Engineer. The county has one contract to bring before you today for approval, and like Larry referred to, it is for Highway 105 Phase A. So this is from the I-25 east off ramp to Lake Woodmore Drive. We're requesting approval for a total contract amount to Wildcat Construction for $14,632,972.50. And as you'll notice in the packet that I handed out, so in the meeting agenda for today, there was a lot of TBDs, and hopefully I gave an updated copy to everybody. But as you'll see, $6,650,170.50 of that total contract amount is PPRTA funds. The rest are various grants and federal sources of federal funding that we receive for this phase. So the total contract amount is in excess of 14 million, but 6.65 is from our PPRTA allocation. The county went through a IFB process. 3 bids were received, and it always makes me happy to note it to recognize that all bids were within $400,000 of each other, which means that we did a very good job of our solicitation documents. Everybody saw the same thing when they were bidding. So we're requesting approval for $14,632,972.50 to Wildcat Construction. Any questions?
Questions for Josh, Richard?
Yes, not so much on this, Josh. I'm delighted to see this contract and I support it. The widening to the 4 lanes is the issue, and I'm all for it here. And my question to you really is not so much here, but the section from here to Highway 103.
83.
Is it 83, excuse me. Lord. I know some of the engineering is maybe not even underway. But is it your impression, not holding you to it, but is it likely that the county is going to recommend a 4-lane highway all the way to Highway 83? That's my question.
Long-term, yes. Short-term, probably not. So Phase A takes us to Lake Woodmore. Phase B goes from Lake Woodmore to Martingale. And then there's a RTA 3 project that I believe is Furrow to Arrowwood, so a little bit of overlap. But after that, we do have a requirement to complete improvements out to 83. What those improvements are TBD. But right now, I don't anticipate a 4-lane cross section anytime in the near future going all the way out to 83. And it'll depend on short-term demands. There may be certain segments as you go east that would require that, intersection improvements, turn lanes, things like that. But if we're talking about an ultimate 4-lane configuration from 25 to Highway 83, I don't anticipate that anytime in the near future. No.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions for Josh on the county's project?
Hearing none, I move that this project be approved as presented by Josh in the amount of $14,632.
14 million.
14, yeah.
Please don't 14,000.
Yeah, that would have kind of shortened it, wouldn't it?
Even if you're off a few dollars, I'll second your motion.
All right, so we have a motion, Larry, and a second by Richard. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Josh.
I do have one other question for
Okay.
Lisa. Lisa, how will you track this particular project? Now, we just approved $14 million plus, but in Josh's presentation, it shows that PPRTA is going to be 6.6 million and then 7.9 million other funds. How will you track that?
That would be, that would be in my spreadsheet, the contracts spreadsheet, and I'll just put in the 6 million and change. And as invoices come in, whether it's the whole invoice or part of an invoice that goes against the PPRTA piece, then we'll just see how that adds up. And when we get to that 6 million and change, then declare a stop.
And then at that point, then any additional funds would come out of the 7 million plus that's in the project also?
Yes, Josh, you want to take that?
That's correct. So we have a couple different funding sources, non-PPRTA funding sources that they have varying deadlines of when you can spend it and when you have to spend it by. So the project manager, and we have our best project manager on this project, will probably pull from the various funding sources as is appropriate. So may start with PPRTA, may start with the first grant that we have, pay those down, and then move on to the next grant, depending on when those funds are available.
And I noticed on the county commissioners agenda yesterday, and this sort of follows on with what I'm asking on how we track this, is that they approved funding in about, I believe it was about $3.7 million for this 105 project. That's part of the other funding sources then?
Correct. So I believe we had an initial grant, and we've had two amendments since then. So I think that what you're referring to is the most recent amendment number 2 to the original IGA, recognizing and appropriating dollar amounts. So there are various local match amounts that we will be using our PPRTA funding to cover. So it's kind of convoluted, but at the same time, it's fairly simple. So what you saw yesterday, I think, was the approval of the most recent amendment to that IGA.
Okay, all right, thank you. All
right.
of you.
All right, item number 6D, Manitou.
Everyone, Bill Rubenick, city engineer for Manitou Springs. And I was told this would happen when you've been in the industry for a while, but I was on the CDOT I-25 and 105 project, and now we're coming back through to widen it. So that's how I know I've been in this industry for a while. Because I thought that was going to be good to go for a long time, but then housing development continued to happen. Okay, so before you, we have a small contract. I was here months ago presenting a contract for a fiber optic project. And as we were designing this project, there were certain assumptions that we had existing conduit connectivity through downtown Manitou. As our fiber contractor got there, started to pull fiber, they found out that some of the conduits we thought connected to each other actually do not connect. So this is an additional scope, allows us to bore this gap that we have, which once this is bored, we will pull fiber, and then we'll have conduit and fiber really all the way through Manitou Avenue.
Did everyone get the handout for this?
It was
Okay.
at your table. Dave, did you have a question?
I just wondering physically, where's the missing link then?
I put it in there, but it's from Ruxton it's actually to Tubby's turnaround, but we've been saying Park Avenue.
Is that up Ruxton or is that?
No, it's along Manitou Avenue, but
Okay.
from the Ruxton roundabout to just past Park Avenue where it intersects with Manitou Avenue.
Going to the west from.
Going to the
Ruxton?
west, correct.
Okay.
And our big recent project we just finished put conduit in all the way from Serpentine down to this point. So this is just this gap between new and old that we need to connect.
Okay, all right. Any questions for Dole on City Manitou's project? Do I have a motion to approve? All right, thank you, Ed. I have a second. All right, thank you very much. All right, all those in favor of approving the Manitou Springs contract request as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not hearing one, motion carries. Thanks, Dole.
Thank you.
All right, 7A, Colorado Springs Transit. Oh, wait a minute. Oh,
Mr. Chair, Gail Sturdivant, City of Colorado Springs. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the City of Colorado Springs' new official Transit Division Manager, Lano. Thank you.
there you go, Lan.
Thank you, Gail. Yes, I recently applied for the Transit Division Manager position and I have been, it's my honor, that I'm very happy to report that I have been selected in this permanent role. I've been working in this acting transit manager role in the last 11 months, and this is my second week in this new official capacity. And this committee has been very supportive and helping me through this last 11 months, and I really appreciate it. And I do look forward to continue working with this board.
See what happens when you do a good job in an acting role? There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Gail. What's in your packet this month is our regular ridership report. The ridership is still trending higher compared to last year, which we're very happy about. On page 79 in the packet, I would like to remind you that we are officially in our Zero Fare for Better Air campaign. We are offering free rides on both local fixed route and ADA paratransit services buses. So if you haven't tried it, we encourage you to give it a try. The ZEP report is also included in your packet. I would like to call your attention to the revenue service hours, the chart in the middle of on page 80. This is basically a performance measure report that we look at, okay, how many passengers we are carrying per revenue service hours. And as you can see, that number continues to increase month over month, and we are closely monitoring that information. On the next page, this is a request from CTAP last month. The question was, we have been experiencing driver shortage and we were forced to reduce frequency. How is that frequency impacting the service, the customers? This is a similar request to what the board had last year, and we had final report back in February, if you remember. So what we did was we took one route one in both April and May on the days that we had a reduced frequency. In April, 2 days, on April 12th and April 13th, that frequency was reduced. But then the following day on April 14th, the ridership was even lower than at regular frequency than the previous 2 days. So, and we saw similar situation in May. There is no clear direction relationship between the daily frequency change versus that ridership on the same day. However, what we discovered from the board request last year was over a longer period of time, you do see some correlation. On the very last page, we included the information that we discovered from the annual report from 2022, where we discovered that we only had 58% of the pre-pandemic ridership on the routes that had reduced frequency. And we actually saw 72% of the ridership on the transit routes that did not reduce that frequency. So on the daily basis, probably not a clear trend between frequency and ridership, but over time, we do see that frequency is very important to our passengers. So we just want to highlight that information here to this board as well. With that, any questions for me?
Questions for Lynn? Dave?
Congratulations. That's long overdue and richly deserved. So good on you. Look forward to working with you and hearing from you next month and every month at this time. We couldn't be happier for you and more proud of you. So good on you.
Thank you, Dave.
So now there's an opening in accounting.
So I'm very happy here.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome and well deserved. Brandy?
Congratulations. We're very excited. So was the frequency reduction just simply an experiment then
That was forced.
but are you going to keep it reduced? Because
No.
you said it was reduced and then you said you brought it back. So
We the new contractor Transdev has been working really hard training, hiring drivers. However, what they discovered even after they were fully staffed were a lot of people were calling in sick or calling in for other reasons. So on that daily basis, they are still seeing a decreased level of driver reporting to work. They do see improvements, especially this week. We are fully Route 1 frequency has been fully restored, and they actually transported a few drivers from Texas this month to help with the driver shortage situation. But they are very confident they will be fully restoring the services very soon.
so this was involuntary reduction of frequency.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So the goal is to keep
Yes.
the frequency that you guys have set out.
And also we do have, it's called liquidated damages in our contract. If they're not providing that service, we understand the situation, but our customers are not receiving the service. So we do have liquidated damages that we exercise every month if we're not getting the service.
Okay. Thank you.
Lynn, that discussion just made me think it's kind of a continuation. So if you have a driver call in sick, does that immediately affect the frequency and the head time on that route? Or are there substitutes that you move around? Or do they have some reserves they can call in kind of thing? How does that work?
The contractors do have, it's called rum cutting. They have regular service. Here's the packet that drivers are supposed to sign off and operate on a daily basis. They also have extra board for situations like this.
Okay.
But what they have been experiencing is people here are calling off, and also so they are having trouble meeting that service, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So that's 7A. 7B. Anybody need a potty break before we start into this? Otherwise, we'll keep pressing on here. Rick?
Okay, this is review and consider approval or status of proposed IGA with Copper Ridge Metro District between City of Colorado Springs, El Paso County, and PPRTA for advancing the Powers Boulevard North project from Voyager East to Highway 83. Several months ago, the Copper Ridge Metro District staff approached the PPRTA board and asked if the board would entertain an intergovernmental agreement that would be developed jointly between the Metro District, City, County, and PPRTA. Board said yes, so then it was referred to the four staffs and the four and the attorneys for the four entities. So that that draft IGA has been back and forth and revised multiple times. It's now has finally been through the staffs and the four attorneys. And we are now at the place of asking the CAC for review and recommendation either for revisions or a positive recommendation or a negative recommendation to the board. And then that's my intro. I'll turn it over to Gail for the details of the dollars and the reimbursement terms, et cetera.
Ben, do you mind if I ask you?
Go ahead,
Make
Brandy.
sure I understand. The draft board policy that is also in our packet
Yes,
is related to this IGA, correct?
yes,
Give or take.
yes.
But can we recommend approval of this IGA without that draft policy being in place?
Yes, and in my opinion, yes. Gail might have a different opinion. My personal opinion is that there's to have another one of these is going to be extremely rare. So that the policy is less important than proceeding with this IGA.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Rick. I'll just mention that as when Rick started this off, this was referred or requested with the discussion between Copper Ridge and the board. So Josh and myself have been working with our attorneys, PPRTA attorney and the attorney for the Copper Ridge Metro District. So again, I am the messenger. But I wanted to let you know that this is some of this was kind of contemplated, at least from the funding standpoint, for Powers Boulevard in the future, and I'll get into this in just a moment. But one of the things I provided you, and if you're here in the room, you have a hard copy. I know Rick also emailed this out as well, but this comes from, well, it was put together from the city's CIP that's been prepared for PPRTA 3, but this project in particular, when I say this project, Powers Boulevard from Voyager to Interquest, was coordinated very heavily with the county during the formation for PPRTA 3, because this is a joint effort that we've agreed this will be one of the cities that, but this city is going to lead. However, this is one that had funding coming from both entities. When we went through that effort and we did the planning for that effort, we had come up with the amount of $103 million coming from PPRTA 3 from each of our mutual accounts, and then up to a potential PPRTA commitment for a total of $140 million. And that was what, and where that $140 million came from was the cost estimates that were prepared by the Copper Ridge Metro District and our analysis on a total project cost that would likely be a requirement if PPRTA would take that on in its entirety. At no time did we contemplate costs that the Metro districts have put in place to date, but we do contemplate costs that the Metro district are going to be incurring as they move forward with this. So that just kind of gives you maybe a little bit more history and platform. One of the things I can walk through some of the details that are in the agreement, but one of the things I think is most important for you to understand is really when they talk about how the funding would be paid back. So that's where this exhibit's going to be helpful. In the definitions, so just to kind of orient you to this graphic, you have on the right side where it says project name of program funding years. Even though you see a lot of the same things listed, they're going to mean different things going through when we built this funding plan. And they're included in the definitions for the agreement. So I'm going to go through and define those. And then it shows the total allocation over the 10 years. So that would be from 25 to 34. And then under each year that's listed there, that is the amount that is anticipated to be allocated or budgeted both by the city and the county at each of those years, with the exception of the row that is highlighted in yellow. The row that's highlighted in yellow is subject to funding availability coming out of PPRTA 2, and the amount and the years those funding could be available are currently unknown. No, two. PPRTA 2. So I'll go through each of those maybe in the definition. Yes, Jim.
So it's PPRTA 2 B list money.
It is. Yep. And I'll hit that when we go through the
Okay, all right.
definitions, and why, how that's applicable.
Okay.
So the first full row there, that is what is where it says PPRTA capital with a total of 72,000. That is what is referred, I'm sorry, 32 million. Thank you. 32 million. That is what is referred to by definition in this IGA as the city's portion. It is what we planned for when we put PPRTA 3 ballot forward with our planning and when we tied the fiscal constraints to it. That 72 million would be distributed in a 1/10 per each of the years over the 10-year authorization, and that is also included in the agreement. The second row is what they refer to in the agreement as the Mark Shuffle designation, and it's $18.5 million. Where that Mark Shuffle designation comes from is the city feels like Mark Shuffle Road, as you're aware, is a PPRTA 3 project from North Carefree to Dublin. Because we have such a safety and operational concerns on air, we are advancing that now through our traffic operations program. So we're using up some of those funds that are in our current allocation to go towards that effort. The city felt like it was important to be able to have a in-kind contribution to Powers that offset really what we were funding for Mark Shuffle today. And so we valued that at 18.5 million. So we've agreed to, again, pay an additional 1.85 million for each of the 10 years of the PPRTA 3 authorization to go towards Powers Boulevard. The next line item is what's referred to in the IGA as the county portion. The county's been planning on a $31 million contribution. Again, it's a 1/10 contribution for each of the 10 years for the authorization for total 3.1. So those three would basically say our commitment over the 10-year PPRTA 3 authorization as 12.15 million per year. When we were also looking at PPRTA or at this project and funding to get to that total 140 million, the difference actually happens to be another 18.5 million. It wasn't that it was that we just 18.5 million. It's just that's what's remaining between what the city and the county are willing to obligate plus the $140 million total project cost that was anticipated. When we were working on the funding plan for this, a year ago, we were looking ahead at what we thought that was going to be remaining for PPRTA 2. And the reason being we were asked by the board again about a year ago, what's going to be available to go towards Powers Boulevard in the future, and we knew there was going to be something left over. So the city's been working to project what may be remaining, at least from our allocation at the end of PPRTA 2. We had worked with Bev at the time. I was working with Jennifer Urban at the time to know what funding could potentially be available. We thought there could be anywhere between this $15 to $40 million potentially available at the end of PPRTA 2. And because Powers Boulevard is a B-list project in the PPRTA 2 ballot, at the time, the thought was from the board that would be their top priority and ask us to make that the top priority for B-list emphasis from RTA 2 funding that would be remaining at the end of it. So, but there could be $0 left at the end of it, right? But that's why it's highlighted in yellow. There's a potential for contributions for some additional funding in that area. And as you know, our commitment is to completely fund the A-list project. So that all has to be done first. So those monies would only be available if all the A-list projects for PPRTA 2 were funded. So that's, Jim, do you have a question you want me to keep?
No, that statement, it would only be available if all the RTA projects were funded, fully
All
funded.
the A-list projects.
A-list projects were fully funded. So is that implying that any available RTA 2 money would go towards Powers extension?
It would be.
No other B-list projects get done.
let me look at the language and then my understanding is that the board would be committing to make that the top priority for B list projects for under PPRTA too.
Okay. That's how I interpreted what you
Right.
said. So
So what I've covered is really just the definitions and this funding table, and then really kind of laying out what the framework could be for the payback. And then the question comes up, well, what's the payback to, or who's the payback to, and what's the payback for? Right. So basically this agreement would be entering in with PPRTA as an authority to local governments, El Paso County and the city of Colorado Springs, and the Copper Ridge Metro Districts, which is a quasi governmental entity, for the purpose of allowing them under this agreement that Metro District would be part of this agreement, could go and get bonds issued to finish the engineering and construction of Powers Boulevard construction from Voyager Parkway all the way up to Interquest. Costs that could be reimbursed on it are the engineering and construction costs associated just for this project. They would not be allowed to get any financing charges reimbursed underneath this. This agreement would also put the city in the lead to review and to document what is a allowable charge for PPRTA for this PPRTA 3 project. They refer to it as phase 2. There's not enough 2s and 3s in this agreement. And when they refer to phase 2 is basically from I-25 to Voyager Parkway, but they've already paid for 100%. I'm sorry, I-25 to Interquest. The Metro District is 100% paid for I-25 to Voyager, and they have paid for all the engineering costs for the Voyager Powers interchange. And they have paid for preliminary engineering costs from that Voyager Powers interchange all the way up to Interquest. So we would be picking up allowable costs from Voyager to Interquest to get plans to bid ready and for construction. If that makes sense.
so, but not the I-25 interchange
No, they would not, they are not eligible for reimbursement underneath the I-25 interchange.
under
So they
RTA.
can't come back, because this was a question that did come up in the preparation of this IGA. Could the Metro District come back and ask for if PPRTA had $140 million and they only need $110 million for this new segment, could they come back and get reimbursed for what they already
Oh, they don't,
constructed between I-25 and Voyager? And we landed on no.
Right, okay.
They can only get picked up from where they are today, essentially, once this IGA is entered in as an allowable cost
Voyager 80.
through the duration, if that makes sense. I'll be clear, there's no financing costs. There is associated with this. So it's really truly the construction costs, engineering construction costs we would anticipate if the city was leading this project without advancing this project. You may want to understand what's the intent of doing this. Well, there's a desire to get this road constructed sooner as opposed to later. In particular, that interchange that's at Voyager and Powers, which is why those plans are ready to be bid literally as soon as they can get the bonding put in place. And my understanding is if this IGA is approved by the board next week, that they already have a meeting with the bonding company to go and get those funds issued.
But that
construction.
interchange is not part of the site.
That one is.
Okay, so
The Powers and Voyager is included in this. What is not included is I-25 and Powers. Okay. Because that is already constructed. That is a cost that the district is 100% responsible for. A question that came up that we're just having, the way this agreement's written too, this also puts the onus, if let's say there was cost overruns, it puts the onus on the Metro District to cover those costs for cost overruns. It's under this funding agreement, we've committed the 103 base PPRTA 3 plus another 18.5 from the city to make, now I'm going to do math, probably $121.5 million committed towards the project. There are some other RTA 2 funds that, again, as we mentioned, that could be used for it.
Okay, so I'll let you finish and I'll ask.
Well, I was gonna say, so the Metro District is responsible for the cost overruns and the way this agreement is written. There's also provisions in there. Let's say that said something was to happen, or we wanted to be in a position to take this over if they weren't executing it. The city, if they were not, if they did not use all the monies or the bonding capabilities for the project, and let's say they walked away. I mean, this was kind of the troubleshooting. The city and county would have the ability, and the city would actually be taking the lead to take the project over with remaining funds. As I mentioned in that repayment plan, it's that $12.15 million that's committed per year for each of those 10 years. But we're not giving them that money up front. We're only paying them back for acceptable costs that are going to be approved by the city's oversight. We're going to be using the same tools on that we would if it was a project that was being done in-house by the city. If for some reason, again, they do the interchange and they said, we don't want to be involved in the bond, we want to walk away. If money is still appropriated there, we still have the ability to go through and complete the project or pick up where things were and get it finished, because it is now a PPRTA 3 A-list project. I think that really hits the highlight of some of the major components that are in here. I know you all have many questions, so I think I'm going to open it up for questions now. And then if there's particular things, I can stop and respond to them as best as possible, or ask Josh. He's like,
Okay, Richard, you raised your hand and I'll let you guys do
All
first,
right.
and then I'll let you.
Well, I live about 1 mile from the intersection of I-25 and this connection. And which is quite near Northgate. It was a very interesting and challenging concept, the way they made that connection with I-25 with Northgate already there. I have been watching this particular proposed project for quite a while. The question was going to be, how long is it going to take to get the funding to do it? And I figured I'd probably be dead before they figured that out. And I may be, but I think this is a extremely interesting concept. And there are portions within the area that PPRTA is responsible for in its boundaries that may want to look at something similar to this district. In my opinion, the connection with I-25 over to Powers could be considered the most important single construction project for PPRTA. I'm very biased because of, I guess, my location and where I am. I really wouldn't use it personally much, but I see the advantage of being able to go we have a great east-west highway there, and going down to Powers, which is the long-range plans on Powers, I believe, will be going up to 6 lanes probably. But I support this all the way. I don't pretend to be an expert on it, but I'm delighted to see people looking for innovative ways to get things done that are needed. And that's why I support it.
Okay, we'll just keep going around the room. Ann, you got yours on?
Yes, can you hear me? I was just curious about the bonds. You said that Copper Ridge would do that. What if bonds are kind of not such a good investment right now? So are they going to sell them themselves? How does that work?
Well,
How-
they've
are
already
gonna
been
buy them
working-
themselves.
Right, they are gonna be, they would be buying them.
They would be buying their
They
own
would be
bonds
buying bonds.
and they would
They've been
get
working with the bond attorney and a bonding company. They've already got a date set with the board, subject to approval of this.
so they
IGA.
buy,
And
they give the money to buy the bonds or they pay themselves back or how does
no,
it
so
work?
they would bond for the rest of the cost for the project. And they would pay entrance costs
Interest.
or financing costs up front. And knowing that they are gonna have to submit the engineering costs and the construction costs
Mhm.
for reimbursement, but they still have some liability associated with this because they are responsible 100% for the financing costs. And initiation, I think there's origination fees actually that could be associated with it.
This
They are
is not a
100%.
public offering of bonds.
It is no, I believe it's on the bond market. Yeah. Whether it's available, well, I don't know that I can explain.
It's just
Is somebody better
curious.
find this portion of the public finance, but
They
they are.
sell the bonds, so they create essentially a bond offering.
Uh-huh.
And then people out there buy the bonds, knowing that this is the interest rate that they're gonna get back on the bonds. And then they use these monies to pay back the bond and pay back the people who bought into the bonds. That they
I
offered.
understand that, but what if it goes bankrupt? Is,
That's
how
my
is
question.
PPRTA responsible
We have no responsibility with the bonds
or
themselves.
anything?
No, that the bonds are solely going to be responsibility of the Copper Ridge Metro District. What the bonding companies, the reason why they need this IGA though is because the bonding companies are not comfortable that Copper Ridge Metro District would be able to pay back
This
large
has gone
amounts.
on since 2010, as I understand.
Well,
They've
the-
been trying to get this going, this development.
Well, they have, but they've already done work, so they were able to successfully bond and construct and pay back the portions they've done for, and I think they are paying back, I should say. The interchange with I-25 to Voyager that was constructed already. And they've also used some of those funds for the engineering work that's been done already. Again, and they're not eligible for reimbursement for any of that work.
Have they
that's
done
previously
any
done.
building out there yet?
Yes, they haven't. Well, one of the first
But they don't have a
interchanges.
road? Is that the
No,
problem?
the road is there. The beginning of the road is there. And it may be helpful. Hold on, just, Jared, would you have the ability to pull up an image so we could show Ann the interchange that they've constructed? And you can see the gap. If not, I can do so. So,
You just want the gap from going here to
yes, and if you, or do you have the ability to go onto GIS?
the city one?
Yes.
Yep.
'Cause
That's
that will be the
okay.
clearest. And
You
you know,
don't have to.
well, it's important to understand if you're not familiar with this area.
I'm more concerned
because-
about the money.
Okay. Well,
That's all.
so if they were to go bankrupt, right, Copper Ridge Metro District to go to bankrupt, they have an issue with their bonding company, but we still hold the monies for work that has not been completed. The bonding company has no ability to get monies for that work. We are only be reimbursing the Metro District for the costs incurred for engineering and construction for Powers Boulevard.
Just sounds weird to me.
I mean, this is why we've had the PPRTA attorneys and the city and county attorneys involved in it, really protect all three governmental entities. If for some reason there's something that was to happen with this Metro District. The Metro District does have their own funding source through the URA and the PIP that they have in place in their district. So that's how they'll be covering their portions of the costs. You need to go north. Right there. So on this, yeah, we'll zoom out just slightly, please, Jared. Thank you. So you can see on the left side of the image, and I hope you're sharing, I think so. You can see okay, now you are. So on the left side of the image, you can see I-25 kind of running diagonally north-south. That interchange that's built there going to the east, that is actually Powers Boulevard. And then it currently dead ends at Voyager Parkway with the two ramps coming up the terminus right there at Voyager. That was already built by the Copper Ridge Metro District, and they are not eligible for reimbursement for that portion. Powers Boulevard continues from Voyager, and then maybe you can zoom out just a smidge. You can kind of see the right of way that exists going through Flying Horse. They take that all the way down to Highway 83. And that's where the project is, or that's where the PPRTA 3 project is located. And that's what they're looking to enter into this agreement so they can recoup costs to advance the engineering and construction of that to get that going quicker. Thank you.
Okay, Leanne, that answer your question?
Next week, just.
I don't know.
All right,
Yeah. Well,
Greg.
let's Dave, maybe Dave will help, or Craig, one of them could help.
Yeah. This is a little bit different. There's one thing that jumped out at me. Section 7, it's on page 91. Section 7 B. It starts out PPRTA shall disperse to the PPRTA tax for which an appropriation has been affected by the board directly to the district or its designee. Now, has this money, is this strictly money that's and work that's been dealt with by the district? Has the city or the county been involved in any of this work for which they're being reimbursed for?
Yes. So then those provisions happen later in the agreement. So the rest of that sentence, provided however such distribution shall be made only with respect to approved phase 2 costs.
Okay.
So the city will be taking the lead in reviewing the phase 2 costs and saying what's allowable. So one of the examples, and again, it's not really envisioned this would happen this way, but the city and county are only going to be budgeting the 12.15 million per year. And let's say the district, let's say they slow down. There's no advantage for them, but they only had $5 million worth of costs in 2025 or up to 2025 that were allowable underneath this agreement. Well, the city and the county, we have budgeted and appropriated 12.15. We're not going to give them the 12.15. We're only going to give them $5 million. And the reason why it says direct, instead of having the money come from PPRTA to the city to PPRTA, they're cutting the middleman out from as far as how the money is pushed or passed through, if that makes sense. That if I were to say, Rick, this is an allowable $5 million charge, he and Lisa would cut the Metro District $5 million to pay for that approved phase 2 cost.
Okay. Was that 5 million though spent by the city
No, it
initially?
would be spent by the Metro District.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
David.
I need a whiteboard.
Gail, as always, this is a very complex issue, and I really would like to echo Ann's concern. I'm kind of leaning toward a no vote at this point. I think just because it's maybe for my simplified brain, it's a bit complex. But I do share Ann's concern. What I think I'm hearing from Ann, I'd like to echo, and maybe you can help us understand what is in just simplified terms, what is the absolute worst case scenario in the terms of, yes, they're building the project, they've lined up debt service and tranches of funds to come in to do the construction. And then, as we've seen in 2008 here in this community, as I'm sure we'll see again in this community, the development will come to a grinding halt. Debt service payments stop, and somebody's left. Bondholders normally are left holding the bag, the proverbial bag. But walk us through what is the worst case scenario that we could be envisioning here if this goes off a cliff? We execute the contract, and do we get a whole road? Is it a chunk of a road? Do they stop in the middle of the field? With an $11 million road that goes nowhere.
Right. I've asked these exact same questions, Dave. So a couple of things. When they go to get the bond, they're not going to issue the bonds for all $140 million that they're anticipating needing throughout the entire.
And that's
project.
troubling to me because it sounds like we do get a road to nowhere then, worst case.
Let me.
Okay, please talk me out of it.
Let me talk it. We got to remember that is a situation between the bonding company and the Copper Ridge Metro District, but they're not going to ask for all 140 million upfront in day one. They're only going to be asking, they're going to be asking for the funds as needed in chunks as they get through further areas. So first round of funds they're going to be asking for is for the construction of their first portion of this work, which is
Can you read the
focused.
graphic again, please? Would you mind? It's just, I'm a little fuzzy as to, there's a phase 2, phase 1, what's built, where they're going, and
Right.
and there's a pause point here that I don't quite understand.
There is a desire for them to get that the new interchange at Voyager and Powers constructed first. So if you can kind of, Yeah, no, I understand. So slide down just a little bit so we can get void, no, down. Yeah, sorry, mine.
Go north,
mine down. So, thank you. So, their initial, my understanding from them, their initial bond request is going to fund construction of an interchange at Voyager and Powers where Jared has the cursor. And he's going to draw a circle apparently in that area. So we're going to finish this new interchange at Voyager and Powers. And they were going to advance the engineering for the rest of Powers Boulevard from this new interchange all the way down to Interquest or Highway 83, where you currently have the termini there.
So they bring you an invoice at that time and request reimbursement for an interchange, arguably, and I'll be a skunk here, arguably that's not needed at the day it's completed, it's not needed because it goes nowhere.
Well, they actually say that it is needed because of the developments that have been approved there, which is why they want to advance that portion first. So you think about the amphitheater and some of the other land uses that are already approved up in that area.
I'm not sure I agree. I respect what you said.
But that's what the argument. I just wanted you to be aware of that. So anyway, that's what they're intending to do. So let's say, I don't know the exact number, let's say they're going to take $30 million out day one. So they could have the potential to go and bond for more funds up to the $140 million, only knowing that PPRTA with this agreement, it was going to be willing to guarantee reimbursement of $121.5 million, right? Let's say they go and do that work, they do the engineering work and they're like, we don't want any more of this bonding, we're out.
Right.
We will only pay them for what they've expended as an approved cost. So if they did construction, we would pay for the engineering construction, we pay for the engineering that what they have done on Powers Boulevard. If need be, we as the city would enter into a contract to finish the work and still have the remaining monies available throughout the 10-year authorization of PPRTA to use it. They don't get this money in their hands. This is just how we're intending to pay back the cost for this work over time. I would say the thing that would be the hardest for Josh and I at one point in time we ever had to pick it up is that we've spread this money out over 10 years. You think about this is a lot of our 10-year authorization to get enough money in enough 2 or 3 consecutive years. That's everything we get in our PPRTA capital authorization. So it behooves us to be in a position to be able to spread this money out over years. The other scenario you mentioned, Dave, that what happens if the engineering's going and from Voyager all the way down to 83 and they're doing the main line construction and let's say Copper Ridge goes bankrupt or something happens that we aren't foreseeing and construction's in the middle. We can only pay them for what has been constructed, but the city would be in a position to pick up or issue new contracts to complete the work based on the work that had already been done. But we would enter into a separate new contract with that contractor to finish the work at that point in time. So we have the ability to step in if there's some kind of default by the district, but only not a financial default. The default would be completion of the engineering or construction that's envisioned underneath this agreement.
Go ahead.
A little bit off the subject, but it looks like where the blue line goes through a box, a yellow box, it's just to the right of Voyager. Is that land that they have to acquire that's not factored in, or
They already own that land. Either the
Okay.
city or the county already own that land.
is there a reason it's boxed off, or?
It's not in the city limits,
Oh, okay. So that's Josh's problem then.
but he doesn't own the property.
Yeah, I don't own anything. No, it's out, it's within unincorporated El Paso County. It's not a county-owned parcel or a county-owned piece of land. It's just not part of city limits.
Okay, but it doesn't impact the cost or anything with, okay.
And I will say, just to kind of add on to what Gail was saying, Dave, you were asking about kind of worst case scenario. I mean, worst case scenario would be they stop construction midstream at some point.
Yeah.
We, PPRTA, county, city, the region still gets it's $30 million. If they've done $30 million worth of construction, they've been reimbursed $30 million based on what's been approved. We still get $30 million worth of infrastructure. The unfortunate part is now the city and, well, the city leading it, but the city and county are now responsible for contracting out to complete the work. So we would still get $30 million worth of infrastructure. Now we just have to figure out how do we go about completing the work that's incomplete.
Right. And thinking about too, advancing the project, we're actually getting time value of money by doing it now versus waiting 5 to 10 years but it's how long it would take Josh and I to get up money together to go do construction otherwise. So that's a pretty significant value as well.
Yeah, I'm working my way around. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So actually, Josh, the question I had is exactly where I think you were going, which is about the cost reimbursement. There's been a lot of discussion in the media and even the political campaign we just saw that had a new mayor elected yesterday. I think that the world of developers, I would never disparage them in public. And I do remain concerned about the reimbursing themselves. I think, Gail, you brought this up, reimbursing themselves at the cost. Tell me about the, I'm not sure if auditing process or review process is the best word for it, but a worst case scenario is, let's just say that they bring in invoices from which they reimburse themselves at a rate higher than the normal, reasonable, and customary. Are you folks auditing for reasonable, customary rates on the construction project? Yeah, we got $30 million worth of work. It's worth 10.
Right. So, and Richard, I may ask you to jump in here a little bit here and just giving you not Richard Robertson, but Richard Zamora a question here. What we would be, the city is responsible for reviewing the costs at all times that are allowable. They're not allowed to get reimbursed. They have to get us actual invoices where we already know the rates for construction. And we already know the rates for the engineering work that's going to be done. And we could go and look at what those rates are going to be allowed in those construction contracts. Reason why I mentioned Rich Zamora's name, because I think you were involved when the city actually reviewed all the costs for the interchange work that they did at I-25. In fact, because it was before I came, Travis Easton personally reviewed every invoice to make sure it was allowable costs at the rates that were in the contracts, allowable costs that were underneath the reimbursement agreement. It didn't fall underneath this IGA, but the similar kind of process. So at all times, it could be subject to audit if the city is going to have the review associated with all these invoices. And so they aren't selecting what they get reimbursed on. They're selecting what they can say, submitting invoices to it. And it's a direct pass through. And we have the ability to say yes or no, this is an allowable cost. And if it is, we'll approve it. We'll let PPRTA know, and that would be cutting them a check if the appropriated funds were there. I say if the appropriated funds are there, because if they start, let's say in July, and they start incurring allowable costs underneath this IGA, we aren't going to have any money until 2025. So that pool would likely be building up, that what we're going to need to pay them back up.
Or if they exceed what we've allocated on a per year basis. Yeah. So in year one, if they have $30 million, there's only going to be $12 million that are available to be reimbursed in that year. So they'd have to wait till the next year to get reimbursed for those costs.
Right. And we plan on including this in our quarterly report, like we do other projects. So we plan on having oversight on all the expenditures. And also we're going to have a separate IGA between the city and the Metro District for the construction oversight of the project as well.
So the two phases that are involved here, build the interchange, build the grade separation, and do the engineering all the way to Powers, or all the way to 83.
Yes.
And then the entire next tranche, the entire next phase is construct the whole enchilada, right? Starting at the newly constructed interchange and build it in one chunk.
Well, the only thing they may do, sorry, but they may, well, go ahead and answer your question.
But then I don't have to ask twice. So interchange of Voyager and Powers, all of Powers, interchange at Powers and 83. So 2 interchanges in the road in the middle.
And there are several structures. This was going to say, my guess is the next tranche that they would go and get or sell for the bonds, it's going to be for the structures. So there's going to be bridges that go over Flying Horse Drive, Ridgegate Road, North. I shouldn't say that these roads go over Powers. You have one at Old Northgate. And then there's a couple actually golf cart crossings that happen that are bridges. And then you'd have the bridge that happens at Interquest 683 itself. And my guess is that construction goes out first, either in one bigger package or a couple packages for those structures. And then there would be another package for the road construction, would be my guess. But the plans right now are really only at a 30% beyond, when you look beyond the interchange of Voyager and Powers.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I was gonna say the interchange at 83 is already done.
No, it's not.
No, it's
No.
not.
No,
Well, you have an exit at 83.
that's all you've done.
Yes, but Powers needs to go through. So there needs to be a bridge constructed on 83. So Powers Boulevard can go underneath Highway 83. Right now, you only have the ramps that exist. The ramps exist where Powers comes up from the north and dead ends at Interquest 83. And then come on the north side as you come off of I-25, it currently dead ends at Voyager.
So
You've got this gap in the middle, and neither of those interchanges at the current termini are built.
So then the groundwork has been done, it just hasn't been built.
I don't even think the ground's fully prepped. The concrete stops right there at the exit.
Right.
And
You
that's
have a raised, 83 is raised, so all you have to do is go under it.
right.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, you're right. Apologize.
All right, go ahead, Russell.
My understanding of bonds is it's normally paid ultimately by taxpayers. Is this being paid by Flying Horse people, or who's the source of the payback?
So my understanding is, and this could be incorrect, but the bonds that would be issued for the Metro District's benefit would be paid by their public improvement tax, because they have a URA and public improvement tax in that area. There's a district in that area where they have their own taxation, and it would be paid by that for their portion, up to the point where PPRTA starts reimbursing it, and then it would be the PPRTA sales tax. Got to remember, this is a regionally significant project, so there's some localized funding that's associated with it through the Metro District, and then regional funding through PPRTA.
It's part of the normal tax.
Normal tax,
For the entire county?
that area,
RTA.
it's sort of the same thing as, like, for example, if you go to Big R out in Falcon, if you look at the tax receipt from there, they've got an improvement tax on it. Same thing happens up in Flying Horses. When I've eaten up there several restaurants, and I look at my receipts the same way, is that there's a tax on there, and that's where the money's coming from for the bonds and the interest.
Baptist Road had the same thing for the Baptist Road Improvement District.
Same thing.
Same thing.
But it's in that region,
Yeah,
not spread out through all of our.
Just in
No.
that region.
just that region where, the Copper Ridge Metro District is located, which is, pretty much where you're seeing on the screen right now, Flying Horse.
Got it.
So, yeah, if you, like, for example, if I live out in East Black Forest, no, I'm not paying for it. Somebody in Colorado Springs, no, I'm not paying for it. So it's just that area that you see there on the screen where they've designated the Copper Ridge Metro District. That's where the funds will come from to pay for the interest on those bonds.
So it's a burden on the retail customer, not a burden or a risk taken by the developer. The developer's not on the hook. The retail customer is.
Well, that's no
Retail
different, Dave.
over time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Dave, there's
I understand. There's a lot of examples. Woodman and the King Supers on Woodman Road.
same thing.
Same thing. They buy a box of donuts and you get a nickel,
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Same thing.
surcharge on top of that. Yeah, and I understand. It's just a matter of
The thing
who's
is
on the
that
hook.
King Supers, Woodman, and they're on Woodman.
Rangewood and Woodman.
Rain, yeah, it's God, the tax has been on that for what, 20 years
20
then?
years. It's surcharge. It's a surcharge on tax.
It's a surcharge, but yeah, that's where the money,
Through property tax though, for those people, is it part of their tax?
no, it's not part of their property tax, no.
Emily, do you have anything?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think this is a lot of great work put into this and I'm generally in support. I just have a couple questions. Does this give the city or the county any authority on selecting professional services or the contractor quality?
Underneath this IGA, that is not specifically spelled out.
Okay.
We are going to be entering into an IGA to really focus on the construction oversight and really the acceptance of the project, because I have concerns there. So no.
Okay. Okay, understood. And then also the utilities row here was left to be determined. Can you kind of elaborate on the coordination with utilities?
Is there a particular portion on here that you're looking at? I don't remember.
Oh, sure. On the
spreadsheet.
On the spreadsheet you handed out.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, on the financial.
Yeah.
Yes, because some of that was to be determined. Still, this was really very high level. We assumed that when we got the construction costs from the Metro District based on their preliminary engineering, that it included the utility relocations. So there may be some offset for this total funding as well from utilities. Thank you for pointing that out. I should have hit that, but they are not party to the IGA and they're not really mentioned in the IGA.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it?
That's all.
Okay, Larry.
The IGA, as you indicated earlier, indicates that Copper Ridge Metro District will be responsible for any cost overruns in the project. Now, the one thing I didn't see, I did see that in there, but the one thing I didn't see is somewhere along the line, they're going to run into some sort of problem that is going to require additional work or design on the project to continue the project. You know, as we all know, on this size of project, you're going to have change orders. How are those change orders going to be handled? And are they considered a cost overrun? Or would they just be considered as a change order and an amount added to the contract price?
So it would, a simple answer is it would be part of the contract price as a change order. When we're referring to cost overruns, that may not even be the right term for it, because I think when we're saying cost overruns, at least in this forum, it's beyond $121.5 million. Right? Anything that's beyond that, because all you're guaranteeing through this IGA is reimbursement up to $121.5 million. If the project really costs $140 million and there is no PPRTA monies left over after the A-list is completely funded, the Metro District would have to bear that cost of that extra $18.5 million.
But a change order could push that dollar amount over the 121.
And if it's $150 million cost, PPRTA is only guaranteeing to reimburse them $121.5 million.
That's interesting. Okay.
All right, and if I may, and I'll get to you, because I want to pick right up on that point, that one of the cost overrun things. So we're setting a cap on the project that's 30% designed, going through an area that has environmentally sensitive areas, long bridge and drainage issues, and there's a high potential for cost overruns or additional cost to the construction of the project. Why does a Metro District have to eat that? Why is it any different than any other project that we fund that Metro District and the two leads would come back to the RTA for increased funding from the RTA, just like you would any other major project?
Well, I would say right now that is not contemplated that they would have that ability to go and do it. They're really treated underneath this IGA as a partner to collaborate to build this regional transportation element. They want to take the lead and advance it because there's some economic benefit for them to finish getting the road in there for the development activities that are happening in there. But the rest is really more for the regional good. And if you think about it from regional good, the more people that can get up powers in that area, they think that the economics is going to help support their recovery for their public improvement tax. So not to say that that question couldn't come up, it is not contemplated in this IGA. I mean, there's only so much we can do with the next 10 years.
This gets us started. We'll address other issues as we come to them.
But I will tell you, the construction estimate that was provided to us when we were doing RTA 3 last year was much less than the $140 million. What we did, and I say we, and Jennifer was here at the time, we took the estimate they gave us and we looked at what we thought would be a reasonable total project cost. And we put some contingency on there. And we're the ones that came up with the $140 million potential project cost on it. So there is some contingency built into the overall concept of the project.
Okay. All right, next question. On pay, and it is maybe pointed towards Lisa. But if somebody mentioned the audit. So on page 93, section 10B, it talks about the audit. And my question was, when we have our annual audit of expenditures against other projects and this kind of stuff, would the RTA money that we are giving these guys be included as part of our audit? Would we have to expand the scope of our audit to make sure we cover efficient and, complete use? Have we thought about that? Or is that an issue?
I've thought about it, Lisa. I don't jump in if I get this wrong, but the way this is written, since the city is going to be overseeing these statements and the phase 2 costs, we were anticipating the city auditors would audit the project.
Okay.
And report back, but you may feel differently, Lisa.
That sounds right. As far as what we're auditing, my role in the audit is just that we are reporting what comes in and what goes out, and that it's allocated to an appropriate project. So if this was going to be a city project, it would just be allocated as that.
Okay. All right. I want to just clarify what I heard about Mark Shuffle and make sure we're on record for it. The quality or quantity of work on Mark Shuffle is not going to be affected by this paragraph that transfers future Mark Shuffle money to this project.
That is 100% correct.
Okay, 'cause I want the public to know that we're not shortchanging a project that's been in the books for 10 years and is way overdue. That we want to make sure we're clear that we're taking allocated future money because you advanced it and doing it this year. The money that was forecast in the future will be put towards this project.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay.
As you are aware, in the construction contract we brought today, because we have the safety and operation concerns on Mark Shuffle in particular between North Carefree and Dublin, we've been working to putting monies in there, and we're going to be starting those improvements now because they're so needed. And if you recall, Mark Shuffle is a PPRTA 3 list. We still have a commitment to 100% fund and complete that work under PPRTA 3. It's just really more of an adjustment, and the year's funding they're spent to advance 2 much needed projects for our region.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that that was publicly expressed. All right, I've got one last question, and I'm going to let Steve or Carlos go, and then I'm going to come back to my last one because it doesn't have anything. Okay, because it doesn't have anything specifically about this IGA, but it's about the overall project.
Sure. Okay, I'm generally in favor. I think I echo Mr. Robertson's comments. I recognize the regional benefit, the connecting powers all the way to the north to the interchange will provide all of us. So I'm very much in favor of that. The time value of money, I think, is very important. Constructing this in 10 years will be far more. And I can also attest, because I was involved in the I-25 interchange with powers, that the construction, that the amount of dollars that it took to construct that interchange was considerably less had CDOT constructed that. This is incredibly efficient. So not only are you gaining from the time value of money, but the construction is maybe half what it would have taken CDOT to construct that interchange. And so consider that as well.
Okay, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you for your patience here. And as Gail knows, I get confused here. She's not here right now on some of these budget items. I wanted to just go back to last year when PPRTA 3 was put together. I am reviewing the material from last year as to the actual cost estimate that was brought before this committee and also before City Council. It was $103 million. And what I'm trying to understand is how we went from 103 last year to 140 today. And maybe I just don't understand what's here, but I'm trying to understand why we need to put in $37 million more when last year we said this project could be done for $103 million. I'm looking at the cost estimates that were put into the August CAC packet by the county and also the city council presentation. I'm just trying to understand, we went from 103 to 140. And I just wanted to say, maybe I just didn't understand what was presented from last year. That's my question. So I'm just trying to understand the difference there. And I'll be the first to admit, I may not understand what was presented last year. I'm getting my figures mixed up. But I just want to know what the cost estimate was last year for this project.
Well, I'm sure Gail can maybe speak to that a little bit more
The
specific.
county portion was, do you stick by the 31? That was $31 million. Actually, it was 30.5.
Yep.
No.
Yes,
Was that the cost estimate?
yes. Yeah, well, we baked in contingencies, right? Because we didn't want it to be concerned about, as Jim was mentioning, what happens like with any other.
Yeah, can you elaborate on what contingencies? Is that the 31 million or was it other line items?
They just upped the estimate.
We just upped the estimate,
Which estimate?
the whole thing,
$31 million or
the whole.
what was the cost estimate last year for the county?
I don't have
portion?
that. I don't have that in front of me at the moment.
It's 31 million it's right here.
Yeah, so 31 million is what we came up with, including contingencies based on the estimate that was provided us by Copper Ridge.
Okay, and then 72 million was the city portion. So if we add it up, it's 103 was the cost estimate that was presented last year for this project.
And then I think Gail said that they added contingency and cost adjustment.
Well, so yes, okay. So
What was this where was this added last year? Which line item?
for the contingency,
Was it the Mark Shuffle? Was it? Do you see my confusion here? I see 103 was what was presented, but then I hear there's a contingency. Where's that contingency? Here's Gail.
okay.
$72 million. Has that changed from last year? Or for the city
For the
portion?
city's portion, no. But when we costed this project, again, we got the construction cost estimates from the Metro District. We took that, and I have a particular total cost project worksheet that picks up, all your costs, whether it's right away, if it's material testing. And I also include contingency based on the accuracy. And I also do inflation based on the year I receive the estimate and the year we're anticipating construction. When I worked on this with Jennifer and Bev at the time, we came up, we thought the worst case for the total project costs was $140 million. So we were working, that was remaining cost. So we worked on a funding plan to come through to do that, what makes sense to divide and conquer that. We looked at what made sense within the city's program. We looked at what made sense in the county's program. And we're like, well, if we could come up with around $100 million out of RTA 3, are there other options? At the time, we also thought there was going to be more money coming potentially for RTA 2, upwards potentially of $40 million. So that's where, if this is the cost, we can commit this amount of money. And I say we collectively can commit this amount of money towards it. So right now, our base commitment at that time was $103 million total, split between the city and county, based on our, at the time, really what we were using for our percent split for allocation. So it's 72 million for the city and it was 31 million for the county. The rest needs to be made up somewhere else, and it was really intended for RTA 2 carryover or picked up by the Metro District. But we thought the cost was $40 million. In that $140 million, when we planned this out, it included contingency. That makes sense. So you don't ever see this. There's a difference between project contingency that you're not seeing here.
Maybe I can phrase the question. Maybe I can phrase the question a little bit differently. I mean, it was presented to city council and it is CAC as $103 million in the line item for that line item for the voters that we're going to, say, hey, if we complete this extension, here's our cost estimate was 103, but apparently there's other areas within the budget that we're going to cover other portions of the cost. I'm actually troubled that, to me, it just seems evasive that the contingencies are being put in other parts of the budget, or at least what was estimated. I thought I relied on $103 million. I said, okay, how much is it going to cost? $103 million. But apparently that's not it's 140. It's a 40% difference. It's not, that's quite significant. I always think a contingency about 20%, but this is about a 40% delta. Anyways, I just feel like there's, I'm troubled by this, but I'll let other people ask questions. Thank you.
So Gil, just maybe to clarify, so was the 103 basically the PPRTA 3 ask?
That was.
And then that's not the total project budget. That was just what you were asking for out of
That is
PPRTA.
correct. And we were clear, and at no time did we, the only time that we used the 72 million and the 31 million as our planning number when we were fiscally constraining our projects. And we knew that that's what we were going to commit at that time, if that makes sense, knowing that there was going to be more project costs.
So it's exacerbated a little bit by moving it forward because you're using the O2, the RTA2 carryover from B to the total project cost that wasn't part of the discussion of the 103, which is RTA3 cost.
So when we were doing RTA3 costing and pricing this project, the discussion was being had about if there's potential PPRTA2 monies left over after those A-list projects are funded, that would go to Powers Boulevard.
I remember that. Okay. Right, Brandy?
I would like to reiterate what you said, Steve. The time value of money is well worth it. I know for those around the room, this seems like a risk, and I think things like this are definitely going to be a risk, but I'm going to put faith in the attorneys, lots of attorneys that have looked at this and in our economy and our new mayor and our county commissioners to bring this to fruition. Independent of that, I have some really easy questions. What's the timeline and will it be constructed to 6 lanes?
The timeline is that if the PPRTA board approves this IGA, my understanding is the Metro District plans on going to the bonding company this month, getting the funds secured for construction of the interchange at Powers and Voyager and starting and putting the project out to bid fairly imminently, with construction starting, I would say, based on what they've shared, in 3 to 4 months time by the time they get all the permits and everything in place to start. So that answers one, to start that. And then they also would need to initiate or either extend or initiate their engineering contracts for the rest of the design piece. They have used a couple firms for that in the past. Ultimately, the section is only going to be 2 lanes. What you see, Powers, it would be constructed as what you see basically from research to 83 today. There's plans. I mean, they've laid it out where you can widen that in the future, but the plans is for it to be 4 lanes, 2 in each direction. Those are 2 easy questions. Or did I hit everything?
When do they think they're going to end?
So
Estimate.
it's 26-27 timeframe.
Okay. And if there are potential monies available, is there a way to contemplate 6 lanes so we don't have to go back in there to widen it? If magic happens and money falls from the sky. I mean, I know it's 6 lanes south of Woodman. So I can't imagine we're just going to get to the point where we're shoving 6 lanes of traffic into 4 lanes.
Well, but we also have grade separation, right? You're going to have operational efficiencies that you're going to get. But right now, I would not anticipate it going to 6 lanes with the initial construction.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to say, in general, I'm supportive of the concept as well. The other thing, though, that is a little concerning, just, from a PR perspective, is if they do default or whatever term you want to use, and then we're in the middle of a project and we got a road to nowhere. I mean, that is going to be an issue to explain to the public, and trying to figure out the timing to actually complete the construction so we have a usable road at that point in time. So, I mean, I don't know what thought you've given to developing fallback plans or when you're going to have some of those things potentially available. Because, I just know working at CDOT, we had a bridge to nowhere for a little while too. And it was painful to live through that year after year after year until we were able to come through the funding.
Right. And, Rich, that's a good point. I think that after this first tranche of money and that work happens at Voyager and Powers, it's going to give us a good sense of where we're going to go and where that relationship in the viability, this relationship with the Metro District is going to lie. We've had successful working with them, though, on the I-25 and Powers work that they've done so far. But there is going to be time to work and do that. And if we need to step in and take over and put new contracts in place, we're going to be positioned to do that. We just may need to be borrowing some cash over the 10-year period of time to pay out these contracts to keep the work going. But once you get started, it's going to be important to keep going.
Okay, one last question. Go ahead. Dave, will come back.
Yeah, it was just a general comment. By the way, I do agree with the general concept of time value of money. If you can get it now, it'll be cheaper than it is in the future. What I don't know if we can do this, but maybe I'd like to see a presentation on what the cost is at the PPRTA if we did it in-house versus what the contractor is done. Based on the data I have here, the numbers I have here basically doesn't show time value of money here. There's not enough information here to say, yeah, the developer can do it cheaper than us doing it later. So I just wanted some more numbers here. And in particular, like I said, I do understand, the ask, we're asking this for PPRTA, but it does say in the column title, it says cost estimate, cost estimate has an asterisk beside it. It really is cost estimate, but we're going to lower that cost based on what we think carryover money or other money coming in from PPRTA 2 is. So again, I kind of feel that the numbers I have in front of me from last year are not reliable at this time to make good decisions. And so again, I do feel that if we can accelerate this project, we'll get a better deal for the taxpayers. We want to be smart with the taxpayers' money. But at the same time, I just wanted to wrap my head around, are we really going to save money by doing it now versus later? And I don't see evidence of that right now. I hear verbal assurances, but I'd like to see some more information in writing. If it was put to a vote today, I would be a no vote, but I can change my mind if I saw more evidence that showed that we can do it cheaper by going this route, or at least the same than doing it in-house. So thank you.
Josh, you want to respond?
I mean, I think a presentation may be a little unnecessary. I mean, so on average, if we're projecting year over year for future costs, I mean, you could conservatively, you'd be using 5% year over year. I mean, just in this last year, though, we've been seeing 20% increases in costs, 20 to 30. And so, I mean, if they're planning to complete in 27, we wouldn't be able to have the entire 121 million until year 2034. So you're talking about 7 years of potential minimum 5% increase year over year, potentially 15, 20, 30%. I mean, who knows? Unfortunately, no one has a crystal ball, but when we do our long range forecasting and estimation, we typically kind of fall back on a minimum of 5%. So you're talking about 5% over 7 years, which is what we could conservatively be saving by getting the project completed, but in 26, 27.
Yeah, and can I add, we never said we were doing it cheaper. We said we were doing it sooner. So we're incurring less increase in costs because it's still the same standards, whether the Metro District's taking the lead or the city or CDOT's taking the lead in this case. In fact, if CDOT did it, it would cost us a lot more, right, Rich? Because then we'd have to do some other things. Just giving you a hard time. That's right. There's a reason why you have left the door. No, I'm just kidding.
Mr. Chair.
It's just a delay.
We should go get the bonds. The PPRTA, this is a general idea.
We are not allowed.
That's off the table. That's way off the subject. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My closing comments, I think, would be to really echo Carlos's concern. If I think you summed it up very well, Carlos. If there's a vote at this moment, mine would be no. I completely agree, Mr. Murray, with your comments, and Richard, with your opening comments an hour and a half ago. Completely agree with the concept, understand it, get it. The three primary concerns I have, one, I think, Carlos, you nailed two of them right there, or two of the nails in the coffin for me. Rich, you just touched on the one, which is there's not a usable road. If this thing does go off a cliff, then there's a nice piece of road into the dirt. I'm not satisfied. I've heard a nice, easy exit policy or some recovery mode. This is an all or nothing vote today, as I understand it. It's not like let's move this forward a year, pause. Okay, you're performing satisfactorily. Let's do the next. Pick any number of time, but I don't like a 10-year chunk when there's a high likelihood there'll be a deep recession sometime along there, and our future successors will be dealing with this. But so Rich, to your point, there's not a usable chunk. That's in my mind a nail in the coffin. And then Larry, I love you. I respect you 100%. I think you talked me out of it mostly when it's not, and this is a philosophical issue about who pays for development in this community. Is it the developers or is it others? Is it the mill levy people that own and buy homes? Is it people who buy donuts and King Soopers? It's not the developers. And I know it's a complex funding mixture. There is some developer risk here, but it's not entirely all developer risk. So Larry, to your point, and Carlos, to your 2 points, Rich, to your point, if we're asked at this moment, I'm going to vote no, I think for 4 solid reasons. Happy to be, to Carlos's point, talk back out of them.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would Gail, make sure I understand? You said that if we start on this project, we have committed to 121.5 million. Is that correct? Is that correct?
If they're continuing to progress underneath this IGA, we've committed.
But
to pay
that's
back
our
one-
ceiling. That's our ceiling.
Yes,
Okay, if they put invoices in for, let's say, 50 million. And we pay those and they have the project progressed to the 50 million point, and all of a sudden they go belly up. Then we still have 71.5 million left. Isn't that correct?
that is correct. And it's also written in the agreement, if that situation were to happen, the city would have the ability to contract for the remainder of the work necessary for the
That's point
road.
I was trying to make. So we still have 71.5 million dollars to do it ourselves.
Yep.
How do we lose on this? I mean,
Yeah.
how do we lose? The only ones that I.
You know, our risk exposure on this is actually relatively low, Rick.
Right. It
Seems like it's
our
complex, but it's
exposure
really
is
not.
Small, so low. The exposure to me seems to be on the what is it, Briar Ridge or the development company? What's the name of the Cherry Creek?
Copper Ridge.
Thank you, the Copper Ridge. They're the ones with the exposure. Unless I'm misunderstanding something. Thank you.
Okay, I got one comment. It really doesn't have to do with the IGA, but it may show up, and I'm glad that the ACG transportation folks are here. State passed a greenhouse gas law that it particularly points to capacity increases, and this is a pure capacity increase. And it's a big dollar amount and a lot of roadway. And so we haven't talked about that. It's not in our purview, but it's the only really large project in RTA 3 that adds a tremendous amount of capacity. And so my concern would be, is it some way along the way we trigger, and if this or the combined PPACG projects trigger that greenhouse gas, is that triggered a threat to this project, or what else has to be given up? And that's an unknown because we don't know what the atmosphere in the air is going to be. But am I thinking generally in the correctly?
Well, John, I was just wondering Gail, I don't know if you want to, you have a answer for that, or you want me to do my best? I think, did you talk about?
John, I would ask, maybe you could talk about this. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but this has already been included in our long-range transportation plan, which is already included in our model.
Okay.
As a regionally significant project. So this should already be planned for, but this is where we get in some nuance with this regulation that I would pass it off to my colleague, John.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, but yeah, that's exactly right. It's in our baseline data.
Okay.
And so if at some point when we do the modeling, we have a piggy bank of GHG that we're allowed to spend in the region. And so if we have all of the projects sort of fill up the piggy bank, then it's that at that point we need to go and look at, well, we're not allowed to do any more capacity projects.
what capacity projects would we cut from the plan? The PPRTA projects is a promise to the voters. And we have committed from the very beginning that if there is any sort of GHG reductions needed in terms of removing projects, PPRTA projects are not included in that conversation.
I remember that during a discussion and the stuff, and I went to the videos for those greenhouse gas discussions, but I just wanted to, it occurred to me yesterday that this is a huge capacity increase. And I just wasn't sure whether it was in the long range plan and being already figured in, and it is. So that's.
Could I add one thing on too? If for some reason when we're subject to those reductions and we're not meeting them, PPRTA funding and PPRTA projects are not in jeopardy. Our funding is for federal funded projects, or how that could be allocated, because those could only go towards projects that were reducing greenhouse
I
gases.
forgot that clause. So thank you.
And then the other sort of little tidbit is there is an exercise where you can go by and say, okay, well, if people are traveling down Powers now and they have to go through a circuitous, I use that word correctly, a circuitous route to get over to I-25, right? Let's say that
Using more gas.
you're using more gas, you're creating more congestion. Let's say it takes 7 minutes, and then by adding this, now it adds 5 minutes. We can use modeling to show that this in fact decreases greenhouse gas and therefore is a benefit. So that's a different sort of process, but there are other things sort of in there. But if I understand correctly, this project is in PPRTA 3 and is a promise to the public. So regardless if El Paso County does it, or Colorado Springs does it, or Copper Ridge does it, it needs to be built. And so therefore, we're going to have it in the plan.
Great. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Thanks for hanging around. All right. So okay. So the discussion's all been good. So it's time for a vote. We need to make a recommendation to the board.
I'll let Rich steal my thunder. You want to make a motion?
Go ahead.
I move approval of 7B, the proposed IGA with Copper Ridge Metro District for the Powers Boulevard Extension North projects.
And I second it.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No,
Okay, so hold your hands. We got 3. Anybody online? No. Okay, so we have 3 no's.
That's the way I see it. Yeses, since we can only have 17 voting. But Rich, you're voting for, voting yes, okay.
You got what you need?
So 14 to 3 to 17, okay?
Okay. All right, motion carries. Thank you all. Great discussion. To be determined. I think I had some grave concerns about this when I first read it. Made a lot of notes, but the discussion kind of helped ease some things a little bit. And so that's the purpose of having these discussions. So we'll put our trust in the process and hope it works out. Sure it will. Okay, moving on, 7C, monthly change order and acquisition. It's in your packet. It's information only. Any questions? Anybody got any problems with that?
I have a question for Gail on the first line item. Wooten Road Bridge over Platte. You show an amount of change order of $119,271.
Yes.
Is that a major, well, that looks like a major change order in relationship to the total amount of cost of the project. Was there something that they ran into during that project?
Right. We actually, let's just say kind of, really what happened during the project, we increased the scope. Some of it was that we found some drainage components that were underneath the roadway that really needed to be replaced because they were failing. So then the pavement extended, and then there was some damage done with trucks that detoured around the project that we had to go and do some repairs on it as well.
So it's, what can I say?
I would say that it's mostly owner directed change really from what we uncovered with what was in the field.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave, Randy, appreciate it. Okay, item 7D. Quarterly reports from member governments.
Information in your packet. Be glad to answer any questions. Also, with the voting members who just left, all alternates can now vote.
Okay. All right, the item 7E is a letter of support for funding commitment for the city of Colorado Springs grant application. Gail, you want to?
Yes, I think we've talked about this a few times with PPRTA CAC and board in the past. But there's been a regional priority to work on improving the interchange for the north portal to Peterson Space Force Base. In doing so, it requires an interchange improvements at US 24 and Peterson Road. PPACG applied for it's a Defense Community Infrastructure Pilot Program, or a DCIP grant. I guess it was 2 years ago, to do preliminary engineering and environmental work. The city has been working with them on that grant application and actually have completed the preliminary engineering and NEPA work for that effort. We've also gone through, worked with Senators Bennett and Hickenlooper's office and got $500,000 in correct congressionally directed spending. So we're advancing that project to get to it's ready for construction bid. What we're doing now is we're actually pursuing a fiscal year 23 DCIP grant for the construction funds. The project range, we're working out the details on this now, but the construction cost range is going to be between $12 and $15 million. There is a 30% local match commitment. City is proposing to use our intersection improvements program for our local match. So with that range of project amount, the potential future portions we'd have to appropriate underneath that program for the local match would be $3.6 to $4.5 million. Having this letter of commitment and demonstrating how we would have local match funds is requirement of the grant application.
Okay.
And I'm available for questions.
Any questions on this? Anything that'll prove that Northgate entrance will help me.
Yeah, Larry Tobias, I would like to move to approve the request from Gail for the letter of support on this particular project for Peterson Space Force Base Northgate access.
Carlos second. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. I wanted to say one thing on quarterly reports that I forgot to mention. There's a link on the RTA website to the electronic version of this. For those of you that are on social media, network or neighborhood and places like that. If somebody's getting into a discussion about roads, which happens often in my neighborhood, this is a great link to throw to them to show the progress of what's going on and what people are doing in the region for the roads, because there's a lot of people that don't think anybody's doing anything, and that's not the case. So I just throw that out there, share that link. That's available on our website. Right, Rick, 8A.
Report of recent board actions. It's in your packet. I think the board welcomed the new Colorado Springs. Well, he's not new, but new to us. Dave Donaldson, a city council member, replacing council member Wayne Williams, and selected board director Randy Helms as the board chair for the balance of the year. I think those are the highlights. Any questions? On the second page, Town of Rama Mayor Dennis Carpenter announced his resignation from the PPRTA board as he's resigning his seat as mayor of the town, take a job working for the town. Any questions?
Okay. All right. Next item 8B, City of Fountain request to join RTA.
Okay, the City of Fountain has been looking at the possibility of joining the PPRTA for a couple of years now. They prioritized last year to go to their voters to ask for a property tax increase for public safety, which passed. And now they're, since December and January, after the property tax increase passed with their voters in November, they've been focusing on prioritizing their research to whether or not to join the PPRTA. They've met with us several times. We've given them Board Attorney Jennifer Ivey's typical timetable that she used when Callahan joined. We're into that timetable now. The City Council of Fountain invested in hiring a contractor to do a sampling polling of their voters, and that was positive to join PPRTA, which then took the City Council of Fountain to the next step, where on May 23, I believe it was, they approved a resolution that's in your packet, indicating that they would like to join. And at this point, we are going to take their request to the board next Wednesday, but it is applicable to go to the CAC today to get the CAC's recommendation to the board regarding the favorability of the City of Fountain joining the PPRTA. Questions?
Questions? Any discussion? Comments? Ed?
I know it's up to the board, but how will that impact our structure of representation and voting and things of that nature for the CAC? Because I'm sure Fountain's going to want representation. And
I think the representation on the CAC is negotiable. At a minimum be one, and it might be two. On the board, the current IGA specifies that any new member would be combined with the existing four smaller members, Manitou, Green Mountain Falls, Callahan, and Rama, splitting 3 votes. So 3 city, 3 county, and 3 for any and all others. So currently, the 4 smaller entities are splitting 3 votes, which is 0.75 each. And the city staff, city council of Fountain are fully aware that if they join, then they would be 0.6 along with the existing 4 that are at 0.75 would drop to 0.6 voting power of each of the directors on the board. So they're aware of that. And all of the member governments be aware of that, assuming this passes the board and then goes out to the 6 member governments, because that's the next step as of Wednesday's board meeting, is if the board passes the resolution saying that the board will cooperate with Fountain in its process to join and go to Fountain's voters in November, the next step is the PPRTA board refers out to the current 6. This is per the IGA for each of the 6 governing bodies in the 45 or 46 days between June 15 and August 2nd to for each of those member government governing bodies to vote yes or no on Fountain joining. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Other questions?
Anybody else got any questions online? Okay.
Larry Tobias, I'd like to move for approval of the City of Fountain's request to join the Pikes Peak RTA and a positive vote from the CAC to the board for the inclusion of Fountain into the RTA. PPRTA.
Second.
Who
was that?
Rick. Oh, Rick.
Hoover?
Okay, Rick second. Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, not seeing any, motion carries. All right, HC.
At the May 10 PPRTA board meeting, the City of Manitou Springs Mayor John Graham informed the board that their city staff had recently checked the figures for the tax revenue generated within the Manitou Springs for the PPRTA and the allocations received from PPRTA back to Manitou Springs, and found that the city had not received the same amount generated within their city over the 18-year life of the PPRTA. PPRTA staff has worked with Manitou Springs for several weeks to verify and refine the figures. Even after verifying and refining, there is an aggregate figure after 18 years that Manitou Springs has a what I would characterize as a modest deficit. And the PPRTA staff is working on a possible package of solutions to address Manitou Springs concerns to be presented to the Manitou Springs City Council in a work session on June 13, and then also to the PPRTA board on June 14, next Wednesday. That's about all the detail I can share at this time.
I guess one question I have, Rick, is how over those 18 years through the accounting and the auditing and everything, do we have the same problem showing up with some of the other entities within PPRTA, or is it just relative to Manitou Springs?
It's not relative to just Manitou Springs. I'm being coy on purpose. I think it's best to stay at the regional 40,000 foot level and not dive into who are the winners and losers.
But so I'd like to make just a general without getting into specific winners and losers. When you join, you collect the tax and you pay in based on your retail sales. The distribution goes out based on population. If you have a district that has a higher percentage of retail, you're going to collect more and have a lower population than someone that has a lot of residents and not a whole lot of retail. And that's just a rule coming in. And when you join, that's laid out. Your distribution is based on population or percentage of population based on the census. And the amount collected is what it is, because it's the same for everybody that's in the RTA. So there are some winners and losers, and it'll vary by amount and case, but you kind of know that coming in my opinion. It's unfortunate, but those are the rules. I know staff can't say anything, so. Yeah.
Rick is not saying anything over there. You notice that?
And I respect that because it's still an ongoing issue. Do you guys from Manitou, where's Manitou? He's not here. He left.
He left.
I'm sorry. So, the question would be, is a successful resolution of Manitou's concerns is up to staff to try to sort things out, and the board's got to make a decision one way or another. Did I say anything wrong?
No.
Good.
Green Mountain Falls, Calhoun, and Rama are not losers. So that's about all I can share.
It's just a fact of joining. That's the way the distribution is. That's the way it's always been. So Manitou have a decision to make on whether or not they can live with this or not. If they decide not to live with it, it has implications to all of us. So anyway, we'll leave it at that and see how the discussion goes with the city council next week and with the board next week. That fair?
Yes. Thank you for allowing me to not be fully forthcoming.
All right.
Moving on to our last item.
Yeah, so item 8D, Rick, you want to cover that? This is basically, can I summarize this in a very short statement? This is basically to address if this Copper Ridge thing comes up again, there's a policy in place to deal with it. If you look at the the RTA 3 project list, and you look at having to have a taxing district big enough to support a major project like this, like Copper Ridge, and a major project, there's nothing on the list for the next 10 or 12 years that would ever trigger that. And a fire district or some other special taxing district probably wouldn't have the cash flow to support the interest on the bonds and the overhead and all of that stuff. But the board did ask for us to come up and develop a policy for future iterations of this. And so that's basically what this is about.
I agree with that 100%. The other member governments that might approach us would most likely be other metro districts, like the Copper Ridge Metro District. So, and they, like the chairman just said, would they have the financial capacity to absorb the bond issuance cost, the bond attorney, the bond prospectus preparation, the interest over 3, 5, 7, 10 years? And I just, in my review of the A-list PPRTA 3 projects, I can't imagine where a metro district, because it would be virtually impossible for a sanitation district, a water district, a fire district, a recreation district, a library district, anybody else to approach us and say, we want to advance this project and we have the financial capacity. So I think the odds of anybody else, and just my cursory review of the projects and my imagining the other governments other than member governments in our area and asking for this, I think is infinitesimal. But like the chairman just said, the board asked us to come up with a policy. So I think we need to do that.
Anybody have any issues with the policies, Gail?
Add on to one thing that Rick said, that not only would you have to have a metro district want to come up with the wherewithal to do this, it would have to be paired with an existing A-list project.
Right.
Yes.
Could I?
Sure.
At the bottom of the page here, it says costs associated with the payment, including interest of any bonds or other financing used by the government entity. What is the other financing? Could it be private money? Could it be a grant from a nonprofit?
I think, Rick, when this was written, it was based on the initial origination fees for the bonds.
But it mentions or other financing.
But we don't know. I mean, it's really meant to be open-ended, don't you think? If they were to bring some of the funding source available.
The only reason I would say that sounds fair just is because you've opened the door with Copper Ridge. If they can't do it, they can't do it.
But the phrase there is, but we would not be paying for the costs associated with the issue or payment of the bonds or other financing.
The last 3 words of the sentence right above it, Ann.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I skipped.
Yeah, that's
a list of what we would not be reimbursing.
That was my concern last month when this first thing came up, was what precedents are we starting down the road here? And I've always come down on the public perception of what we're doing. We're here to represent the citizens, and my concern was, what public perception are we presenting by advancing a project and reimbursing a contractor to go forward, especially with all of the sentiment in this community about contractors running things. And so I was concerned about that perception. But once we actually read and got into the IGA, I kind of mellowed on that a little bit. And when you look at the advantages, you've driven on Interquest Parkway lately, you certainly know the demand that this would take off. And I think that when we look at the work going out on Black Forest, the extension of Briargate out through there, and the improvements of some of the stuff that's going out through the southern part of Black Forest, that Powers connection is going to take a lot of stress off of some other streets and other roads in the area. Especially that Interquest Parkway that people are coming over in the trucks and all the stuff are jumping over there and stuff. So anyway, I think the need is there for that project. Whether we have a reoccurrence, I'm not sure, but this answers the board's request of the CAC is to come up with a policy. So,
Do we have any other discussion? If not, I would like to make a motion for approval. This is Larry Tobias for draft policy, board policy number 33.
I second.
And Emily second.
okay, go ahead, Charles.
Okay.
No, go ahead. So we have a motion and a second. Now discussion. I thought we were going to have the actual verbiage rather than, are we just make sure we understand what we're voting on. Are we just voting on the elements that would be in this policy, or are we actually, this is the policy? So I'm just trying to get clarification. What are we voting on?
I'd recommend elements. I'd recommend that this be a 2-month sequence.
It's just a draft.
Draft elements.
Okay, so I just want to understand. So this is the elements of a beginning. So the draft 33 is what we're voting on. One of the things, I wasn't going to make any comments, but one of the things I was talking about, we don't want to incur debt. One of the elements I want to see, and we don't have to put it in here now, I would support it in its present form, is that there's some equity provision in here that we're not concentrating all PPRTA money in high growth areas. There's areas like Southeast Colorado Springs. You see the Academy project. There might be metro district like kind of entities or developers there that like affordable housing areas that might have, they may be an entity, but they're not going to be like a metro district or a large profitable firm. They're going to probably just try to break even as a nonprofit. I'd like to see the PPRTA money being spread out throughout the entire district and not concentrated in 1 or 2 areas of town. I want to make sure that it's equitable and that we're fair to all the taxpayers, not just pockets. So I live up in the north part of town. We're a wealthy area. We have a lot of influence. I recognize that. But I also know a lot of my fellow citizens here don't have the means to be able to afford another car. Some people have no car. They don't have a car to drive around. They're going to need public transit, things like that. I don't want to get on too much of a soapbox here, but I do want to see an equity component as part of this policy, that when we evaluate these kinds of projects, that we're looking at it for the benefit of all our citizens in the district, not just the high growth, wealthy areas. Thank you.
But I think, as Gail pointed out, in order for us to have a project for a district to consider, it has to be an A-list or B-list project already. And so it's not like they could come up with a project just with the entity. So isn't their distribution equitable across the region with the constituting of the A and B list? Does that not accomplish that?
Well, yes, it does. I think we have 8 projects there. Again, just generally speaking, I just want to make sure that we're not, again, it's more of a constant. Well, right now, if we get a Copper Ridge or maybe another Copper Ridge that comes up, and then now suddenly a lot of money is flowing into wealthy areas of the district, of the RTA area. Fountain, I'm coming to mind. By the way, there's a lot of development in Fountain. Fountain people, have you ever been down? Fountain is just exploding, and they have the same thing, but it may not be as it's more middle class housing there. We're not talking Flying Horse in Fountain. Okay, we're talking Fountain. So all I wanted to say is that just make sure that we at least have address some of those concerns that all the taxpayers would have, that we're not just, money isn't just going north of Interquest when it comes to a policy like this. I think, by the way, the policy is moot. You know, if anybody has something, come to us, you know. I have to agree with Rick Sonnenberg here that this policy doesn't even seem necessary. But if we feel it's necessary that we have to put something in writing, we should include some thoughts about equity. I don't have the right words here, but I will support the motion. I'll support in a vote to get the elements there. But next month, if we do this, maybe I can come up with something better, more elaborate as to how we want to be fair to all the taxpayers, not just the wealthy development areas in the district. Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Sorry, I had finished my notes. Any other discussion? We've got a motion and a second, so it's time for a vote. So all those in favor of submitting this to the board as a start of a policy for the elements that would be included in a policy. That okay with you? Is it say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Not seeing or hearing one. Okay, motion carries. Whew. All right. Does anybody have any burning agenda topics for next month that they want to bring up? Okay, Carlos.
I just clarification. I might have missed this from the last meeting or the meeting, but this board policy was at 32, completely funded. I did see on I think it was going to be presented this month, but did I miss it? It's going to be presented later.
No, it slid at the staff level. Sorry.
No. No apologies needed. I just thought it slid here is where I.
And I'll jump in. So the city of Colorado Springs owes a further discussion with Green Mountain Falls to further their understanding what was being proposed on the policy that had been worked on. So it is totally in my court. I'm going to give Rick a pass on this, but he needs some input from me to move forward.
All right.
Yeah, it's a distinct possibility that board policy 33 will be approved before board policy 32.
All right. Seeing no other subjects or topics as burning, any communications from any of the members? Emily, anybody around got any communications you want? Oh, Rick, go ahead.
We've received the PPRTA annual reports for 2023 from the printer, and I have lots of copies. You each have one at your place, but I have lots of additional ones if you'd like to take some.
Share it with your constituents.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll stop by and pick up a bunch of those, but I also congratulate you on 425, and you got all of this done. Congratulations, Mr. Chair. Even with my not being having a brain fart on Copperhead Ridge.
Yeah. I'll have to call off Cheers and Happy Hour. They were coming at 4:30. So all right. Seeing no other communications, I have a motion to adjourn.
I motion.
So move. All right, to give Steve in second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you all for your time and input. It's been a real good discussion.